Yes.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.
Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 1462 of the War News Stream. And tonight we have very big news. We have heard that Russia's warned of an imminent nuclear war over Ukraine, allegedly getting nuclear weapons. We've also heard of major U.S. embassies near Iran evacuating as of today. And also, U.S. F-22 Raptors have now deployed near Iranian airspace, and it seems like we're basically close to the starting point of the Iran war. And it's good to see you all once again.
And of course, we're going to be covering the past 24 hours of the news from around the world as we have been able to see significant developments from the Middle East, Eastern Europe, Western Europe, the Central America region, and also the Indian Ocean over the course of the past 24 hours. We have been able to report that inside of the Russian Federation, the Kremlin, including an official statement from Vladimir Putin himself, has directly threatened the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland and the Republic of France today over an allegation that both countries are attempting to provide Ukraine with a nuclear warhead or components to be able to produce a nuclear warhead. It seems as though at the moment this is an attempt by the Russian Federation to begin nuclear escalations against the European Union as diplomatic leverage to be able to try and see that they start to put heavier pressure on Ukraine to be able to accept Russia's demands, which is largely unconditional surrender, so that way Europe may be able to avoid a nuclear confrontation with the Russian Federation. This is also coming at the same time as the Russian Federation's economy is still completely collapsing, and currently around 350,000 small businesses are projected to fail and implode inside of Russia over the course of this year, according to a financial statement that came out of the Russian Federation earlier today. This also marks the very 4th anniversary of the beginning of the war in Ukraine on the 24th of February of 2022. And since then, we have seen that around 1.5 million Russian soldiers have been wounded and killed in the war in Ukraine, and that the Russian Federation controls less territory now, about half of the amount of territory that they controlled in the opening month of the war in Ukraine. It also appears that the Ukrainian armed forces have decided to have a little bit of fireworks of their own today in celebration of the 4-year anniversary of the beginning of the invasion. and we were able to see that significant attacks were conducted in the Tatarstan Oblast near to the city of Kazan, where the Druzhba pipeline pumping station near to the town of Oltynsk has been hit, along with the oil depot that's directly alongside the pumping station. Additionally, an absolutely massive explosion has occurred at the Engels Air Force Base. We were trying to get as much information as we could on that earlier today, and despite all of my research and digging, it still appears that the reason for this explosion is still largely unknown at this moment. But it does appear that we have been able to narrow it down that it did happen on the Engels Air Force Base or an ammunition dump nearby, showing that some form of catastrophic damage has been conducted to the Engels Air Force Base around the city of Saratov. We've also been able to see that this has generally shown us something else that's a little bit interesting about the Russian Federation, in that the fact that it seems as though they are not doing that well, at least in terms of air defense, still, even up until this point, and that the Russian Federation has seen that significant attacks were conducted against their air defense forces within the area of Donetsk and Zaporizhia over the course of the day, with decent losses being seen in both directions. We've also been able to see, folks, some very interesting clips that we have never seen before here on the channel and have never been published, it appears, over the course of the past 4 years, while I try and figure out how to speak English right there, and we have gotten a whole bunch of interesting clips to show y'all in our location unknowns of the very opening days of the war in Ukraine from 4 years ago. Clips that, I'll be entirely honest with y'all, show points of views that have never been before seen and are actually quite wild to watch, pretty much showing a completely different war to the war that we witness on the daily these days. We've also been able to see, moving us out of the war in Ukraine and the Russian Federation, that inside of the Middle East, significant U.S. force deployments are still ongoing, and we have also started to hear the U.S. embassies have begun evacuating within the area, including the U.S. embassy inside of Beirut, Lebanon. Currently, we have also been able to hear that a large amount of U.S. F-22 Raptors are currently being transited from RAF Lakenheath and into the Middle East. We've also been able to see a larger amount of U.S. strategic airlifts, including C-17s, C-5 Galaxies, and KC-135 and KC-46 Stratotankers, which have also been heading into the area over the course of the day. While all of these military buildups are being conducted from EUCOM's area of responsibility, we've also been able to see significant actions that have developed inside of Indo-PACOM's area of responsibility, with some F-16CMs from Japan being transited out of the area and into Diego Garcia, highly likely to conduct military actions in suppression of enemy air defense tactics against the Islamic Republic of Iran once strikes are confirmed. It does appear that, according to all analysis, including ours on the channel, it does appear that the armed forces of the United States are ready to conduct combat actions against Iran and are largely awaiting the order at this moment to be able to start their actions. We've also seen that as far as preparatory groundwork is concerned, most preparatory groundwork has already been conducted and is out of the way, with the naval station of Bahrain and Al Udeid Air Base largely being evacuated from all accounts that we could see on satellite and picture evidence, once again giving us an idea that the U.S. has moved out vulnerable forces so that way they cannot be trapped and then destroyed in detail by Iranian missile attacks when the war begins. The Iranians still are dealing with a significant domestic upheaval as protests and uprisings are still happening throughout a large part of the country. And while I didn't include a lot of footage of this today because we did have a lot to cover, and I'll be entirely honest with you, there's about 55 bulletins that we have to cover already, so I wasn't able to show you all of these clips, but there were massive demonstrations and protests in Tehran and elsewhere to the point that the Besiege and the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps is once again pulling out a significant amount of forces and equipment into the area to be able to try and put down the protesters and also the rebels that are beginning to resurge throughout the country. And it appears that no matter how much violent action is being taken against them at this point, it isn't really dissuading them, it is only in fact bolstering them, and it appears that it's still growing day over day at this point as U.S. strikes loom in the background. We've also been able to see, moving us into Central America, that inside of the Republic of Mexico, significant counterinsurgency actions are still underway by the Mexican government. The Jalisco New Generation Cartel is still conducting massive amounts of attacks on civilian infrastructure as well as military infrastructure throughout the area of the Jalisco state and others throughout the area of the central area and southern regions of Mexico. And we've also been able to see that the Mexican Army and the National Guard is continuing to conduct counterinsurgency operations throughout this area of the country. We have also had to annotate the coverage of this today because while it is quite significant, we do have a humongous amount of news to cover in basically all fronts over the course of the day. The only one that was quiet, at least over the course of the last 24 hours, was the East Asian region of the world as far as our coverage is concerned, but every other region was popping off unequivocally. So we're going to be making sure to get into all of this news, starting with our largest stories first, and then moving our way on down into the smaller stories of the night. But I do have to tell you all, folks,
Also, by the way, I was going to say real quick, y'all might notice that tonight is the State of the Union address, and we were wondering what the viewership was going to look like tonight. A huge shout out to everybody, by the way, that chose to watch us instead of the State of the Union, because it looks like quite a few people are watching, actually, right now, that thing. So it looks like they've got mega streams going on that situation. So I would assume that when that's over, we'll probably have a massive flood of people after that's finished, once people get done listening to that whole thing going on. But, Enforcer, were you about to say the same thing? I have a feeling you were.
Oh, I actually was going to say the same thing. Before we get into that news, the State of the Union is ongoing right now. So if you are joining us a little bit later, sorry that you missed a little bit of the news. I have a feeling the State of the Union is going to go on for quite some time because the president has a tendency to love to talk about his successes. And so this might go on for another hour or two. We'll have to see. But outside of that, we are very happy to have all of you all here because we are going to be talking in the meantime about all of the major developments in news that has been going on around the world outside of the United States. And I also want to make it incredibly clear that we are not covering the State of the Union and we're not covering internal domestic politics because that is out of the purview of this channel. I would highly recommend that y'all watch another channel if you are looking for that sort of coverage because you won't find it here, unfortunately. But with that in mind, it is time for us to move on into the news that we have gotten over the past 24 hours, which is going to be moving us directly into the Russian Federation, as we have been able to hear and see that the Russian Federation appears to be conducting a nuclear escalation over the course of the day, and one that actually has the official backing in wordage by the president of the Russian Federation, Vladimir Putin. Over the course of the earlier part of the day, we were able to hear that the Russian Federation began to spread a story that, according to TASS, Britain and France are preparing to arm Kyiv with a nuclear bomb, according to Russian Foreign Intelligence Services. That is the FSB. The famous FSB that has completely missed or overlooked basically everything that's actually happened, and has instead come up with this. The British and French want to disguise the transfer of nuclear weapons to Kyiv as being developed by Ukraine itself. This is something that has come completely out of the blue, and I have to make it incredibly clear that Britain and France have shown absolutely no aptitude or will to provide the state of Ukraine with any form of nuclear weaponry or nuclear weaponry assistance. This is a completely fabricated story, but it does appear that the Russian Federation is running with us as much as they can, and we were able to hear that Medvedev, this guy right here, did state that Russia will have to use nuclear weapons against Ukraine, as well as Britain and France, if their nuclear technologies are transferred to Kyiv, and that's according to the statements by Dmitry Medvedev answering a question from Russia Today, which was asked on this very topic. The idea of the Russian Federation conducting a nuclear strike against against the French Republic or the United Kingdom is absolutely absurd. The reason why is because both the United Kingdom and France combined possess about 800 strategic caliber nuclear weapons. All of them, historically, have basically been aimed at Russia, and they have pretty much ironed out the targets that they would want to hit inside the Russian Federation. To also keep this in mind, folks, most of all of Russia and Britain and France's nuclear weapons are actually submarine-based. Some of them are land-based, but very few of them. The French more so get into the land-based side of nuclear weaponry than the British, but that means that the Russians would not be able to conduct a preemptive first strike that would knock out Britain or France's nuclear arsenals, as their British and French submarines would still be out at sea and ready to conduct a strike whenever the orders are given. This means that this sort of a threat against Britain and Russia is largely an empty threat, because we could assure that the destruction of the Russian Federation would be imminent if they tried to conduct some form of a preemptive nuclear strike against the United Kingdom or the Republic of France. Still, the threat does stand, and it is quite a significant one, and we're also seeing that they're threatening Ukraine with a direct nuclear strike over this fabricated information. This isn't something that was just stated by Medvedev either. This was actually repeated itself by Vladimir Putin, the president of the Russian Federation. Sadly, we cannot show this clip right here. This was actually reposted by Smutry Media and then Visegrad24, so we won't be able to show the full clip, but I can read y'all the subtitles below the clip and tell y'all generally the exact wordage that Putin stated today about this very information that the Russians have fabricated and started to put out. I want to make it clear that this sort of a nuclear threat is much different than others that we've seen historically. Usually nuclear threats by the Russian Federation were usually made by some guy on an official podcast that's generally supported by the Russian government, or it was made by Medvedev. We have never seen a direct nuclear threat or an insinuation of a nuclear threat issued directly by Putin as the leader of the Russian Federation. So this is what's giving this one a great deal more of importance and also coverage on our channel, is because this is one of the first times that we've ever seen such a nuclear threat generally being insinuated and directly threatened by the president of the Russian Federation. According to Putin, he stated, by the way, the enemy does not disdain any other means. Well, now the media has probably started reporting on their attempts or intentions to use even some kind of nuclear component. Then he went on to state, after doing some weird hand signals, they probably understand how this could end. Me once again insinuating the nuclear response the Russian Federation would conduct. Now our operational information is also being sent to the media today. And then he went on to also state, if I can get to this part, he's talking quite slowly. It should probably already be there today. I didn't have time today to check it, but there is a talk about a possible explosion of our gas systems along the bottom of the Black Sea. Speaking about the, I believe it's the Turkish pipeline that connects to Turkey, and also another one that transits through the Black Sea. This is the so-called Turkish, let's see here, stream and the blue stream. They just can't calm down. And these were the statements.
What was this? Well, was this his version of the fourth year anniversary of the war speech? Because it seems like it's coming on the same day of the fourth anniversary. So, because of the fact Putin really couldn't claim victory, he couldn't claim that he gained any ground, his version is just to come out and start threatening to nuke the whole world, apparently.
You know, it's kind of a little bit weird because I would have to actually say this is kind of bizarre because it's like it is the anniversary of the war, and so now they've moved on because remember, Matthew, the original claim at the beginning of the war was that the Ukrainians had biolabs that were constructing bioweapons to specifically target Russian genetic data and then kill anyone that has Russian genetics inside of them. And now they've moved on to Britain and France are giving a nuclear weapon to Ukraine, and it's just another fairy tale boogeyman that's been come up with 4 years later to the day to be able to try and escalate the conflict even further. It's actually pretty crazy.
Yeah, honestly, it's insane, really. It seems like they would have come out and said something if it was going well, like, oh, we've gained X amount of ground, we've also increased our economy, we've recovered it, or something of that nature. No words like that. Like, they can't even claim it, because right now the Russian oil economy is basically on death's doorstep. Also, they've actually lost ground. Like, they have less ground now, Russia does, than they had at the very start of the invasion, which is a huge failure. So they literally have nothing positive to talk about. So now it's just, let's just get in a nuclear arms race with Europe and threaten to nuke them, basically, which is insane.
Yeah, a direct strategic nuclear confrontation over what appears to be a completely bogus claim. And I want to make this clear, folks, that this bogus claim was generated by the Russian Federation's intelligence services. And I just want to make it a little bit clear how effective the Russian intelligence services have been over the course of the war. About a month ago, they were scammed by Kirilo Budanov of the Ukrainian intelligence service into believing that the head of the Russian volunteer corps had been assassinated, when in fact the entirety of the time they were actually talking directly to the Ukrainian SBU without even knowing, and they literally wired $500,000 into an SBU bank account without even having any indication that the whole thing was a Ukrainian setup from start to finish. Even the footage that was provided to the Russians was a Ukrainian fabrication to make them believe that the head of the Russian volunteer corps had actually been successfully assassinated inside of Ukraine, which did not happen. That's how effective the Russian FSB is at sniffing out the facts. They couldn't even figure out they were literally getting scammed basically the entire time for that $500,000. We also understand that the Russian Federation and its FSB never caught on to the Operation Spiderweb that the Ukrainians were conducting literally 2 blocks away from the FSB headquarters in the city of Chelyabinsk. Back then, which was around, I believe it was 2025, actually it was 2024, back when Operation Spiderweb was conducted, the Ukrainians were conducting the entire operation out of a warehouse that was literally 2 blocks away from the FSB headquarters for the entire Chelyabinsk Oblast, and they were literally building all the drones, the shipping containers, and putting them on the trucks and shipping them out across the whole of Russia to conduct a drone attack that ended up wiping out 1 in every 3 Russian strategic bombers, literally right under the FSB's nose without them ever knowing until the attack had happened. Now, this is the intelligence agency that the Russians want us to believe has now uncovered a giant plot that the British and the French have to provide either nuclear components to Ukraine or nuclear weaponry. If they can't even see the attack that's literally being grown from under their noses inside of Russia, how in the world are they supposed to see if the Russians or the French are providing a nuclear weapon to Ukraine? That would be something that would be far beyond the FSB's intelligence means, considering that they can't even surveil domestically inside of Russia to any degree of efficiency.
Oh yeah, 100%. It definitely so. The FSB literally got bested. The FSB has gotten embarrassed so many times over the past year or 2 years. It's destroyed the credibility of that agency to the most part because the FSB, by the way, most people know this, but for the folks that don't, is the successor to the KGB. So they took all the prior tactics that they used to use during the old agency and they put it into the FSB. But the problem is though, it's not quite as formidable as you can tell. They're literally having drone assembling factories right under their noses before. They didn't see that. And also, by the way, that whole drone operation where they actually hit the bombers, they didn't see that either. They didn't catch either part of that. So it's embarrassing, really, what's been happening so far, that the FSB has been letting happen right under their noses with no type of foresight whatsoever. It's a huge embarrassment.
Not only that, we also have to mention the sub-campaign that's been going on in the Ukraine war against the Russians in the entirety of Africa, where the Ukrainians send down their own special forces to either grease the FSB in the middle of their own operations in Africa, or the Wagner unit when that existed, which we have never seen over the entirety of the conflict the Russians ever come out on top in a special forces operation against the Ukrainians in Africa. The Ukrainians have basically gotten the drop on the Russians wherever they have been in Africa, and many of y'all will remember the absolutely devastating ambush that was seen that largely wiped out the remnants of the Russian Wagner group that was in Africa inside the country of Mali, where a Russian Wagner convoy was ambushed by the Ukrainian SBU and some hired guns from the local area, and it literally gotten bushwhacked before they could even make it about 20 miles away from their forward operating base. It's fairly clear to me that this sort of a claim is absolutely fabricated, and I know that many of y'all already know that as well coming into the stream tonight. But the fact that the Russian government is taking this as an official line or of rhetoric is showing us that they're putting a lot of serious effort into trying to push this story forward, meaning that they're probably going to try and react or work off of that at some point in the near future. Whenever the Russians put out a BS storyline like this, while we all know that it's BS, it's important to pay attention. The Russians were putting out BS storylines about the Ukrainian genocides that were going on in the Donbass, which were completely fictitious, and the fact that the Ukrainians were working with the United States to create biolabs in their own homeland to be able to generally produce some form of a biological weapon that would kill off all ethnic Russians. And a lot of people back then said that those claims were absolutely crazy, and crazily enough, the Russians would use those very two fabricated claims to start the initial invasion of Ukraine 4 years ago. Claims like these are complete bogus, but they have a lot behind them, and this makes us wonder, what is the Russian Federation's plan behind this, and what are they trying to do with it? And Matthew, what are people thinking about that, and what are you thinking about that as well?
Okay, so now that Russia's come out with this absolutely insane story about how Britain and France are allegedly preparing to arm Ukraine with nuclear weaponry, which is obviously out of the picture. That's just something that they're making up completely. What is Russia trying to do with this whole situation? 74% said they're setting up a false flag escalation where they can somehow justify a nuclear attack on maybe a NATO country or something of that nature, while 16% said Russia simply wants negotiation leverage, and 5% said it seems like it could be real that maybe Britain or France is going to give Ukraine nuclear weapons. So one thing I can assure you, nobody's giving Ukraine nukes. While there are people that are sympathetic that Ukraine give up their nuclear weapons for in exchange for the Budapest Memorandum and thus military protection, nobody really wants to rearm Ukraine with nuclear weapons. And honestly, I would have to say that's probably a wise position to take. We don't want to start proliferating nuclear weapons all over the place. It's not a good idea. The better idea is to make sure that Ukraine's armed well to fight the Russians off like they've been doing for 4 years successfully and keep it going like that. But I think the real reason why the Russians are doing this is because not necessarily the Russians want to start a nuclear war, because that ends badly for everybody. They're trying to find a way to justify mass mobilization, and this is one way to do it. If they're saying that there's a nuclear threat, that would be a reason to mass mobilize the entire Russian nation to go into the armed forces, or at least the people that are eligible, because what other better reason can you have than the existence of your state being threatened by a nuclear threat? So I think they're going to probably fall just a step short of nuclear war and probably do a huge mobilization inside of Russia to therefore attack Ukraine and try to make up the ground that they're currently losing right now. Because right now, Russia's not doing well whatsoever in this war, and it doesn't seem to be changing. So their strategy is going to be to get more men, throw them at the situation, and hope that changes something. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd have to say, folks, that this nuclear threat today is quite significant, at least in terms of the fact that the Russian president is the one largely working off of this claim and then threatening further action off of it. But There is an escalatory ladder that must be achieved before any sort of a strategic nuclear exchange is conducted. Even by Russian nuclear doctrine currently, that is required. So with that in mind, what they're doing right now is they're trying to set out the groundwork of an existential threat to the Russian Federation that could lead to its very destruction, to be able to forecast that to the public, to then be able to take even further drastic actions in a conventional sense, to be able to try and see victory in Ukraine. And this could take the form of one of two things. One, it could be the announcement of a full mobilization within the Russian Federation, not only of the citizenry, but also of the industry, to be able to see that they might be able to eventually overwhelm the Ukrainians and defeat them before the Russian economy completely collapses, which is getting absolutely apocalyptic information out of Russia today that it's still doing quite badly and getting even worse. Or the second result could be is that they are going to use this falsified and fabricated claim as a casus belli, which is the Latin term for a justification for war, against the European Union or NATO at large, and begin a larger conflict against NATO, the one that we've always been talking about here on the channel. They would not win that war on the ground. That we all know. They would probably get the jump on us at least initially because they would have the element of surprise, but they would lose that war if we saw it pan out and generally flesh itself out over the course of several months on the ground. The Russians would lose that war and get absolutely steamrolled. But if they get steamrolled, which everybody knows would happen, the Russians would actually be able to legitimately threaten tactical nuclear weapons usage and then strategic nuclear weapons usage if the tactical weapons don't turn the situation around. And that means that then the West, specifically NATO, would be under absolutely immense pressure to be able to try and make a deal with the Russians over Ukraine and generally the entire situation with them involving NATO as well, or face a tactical and strategic nuclear exchange, which will largely see the end of modern life, at least within the Northern Hemisphere. So for that reason, I think that the Russians are using the sort of a claim today to start laying out the groundwork of a significant existential threat to the state so that they can try and propagandize this on the home front to then be able to use that further to create general mobilizations or to be able to start working on escalations directly against NATO as a exact result. So I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion, because I'm thinking that that's generally what they're going for at this moment. They're not going to be firing off strategic nuclear weapons at anybody anytime soon. This channel doesn't live in the whole world of, oh my god, the nuclear bombers are flying. You know, we don't do that. So I can tell you all, the nuclear bombs will not be flying anytime soon. That's not happening. The threat still stands, though. That's not going to be followed through on. They're just using this as a justification for more increased conventional actions like the declaration of a full mobilization. It also appears they're still trying to get as much control on the domestic home front as they can, especially on surveilling and stopping Russian citizens from having any free speech, as we were able to hear that according to Pavel Durov, who is the founder and CEO of Telegram, he has stated the following today: Russia has opened a criminal case against me for aiding terrorism. Each day, the authorities fabricate new pretexts to restrict Russians' access to Telegram as they seek to suppress the right to privacy and free speech. A sad spectacle of a state afraid of its own people. And I gotta say, that's absolutely wild. Right now, Pavel Durov, who is the founder and CEO of Telegram, has personally stated today that the Russians have actually opened up a criminal case against him for aiding terrorism. So that is a little bit interesting to say the least, and it's also showing us that the Russian Federation is still trying to get as much control on the domestic home front situation as far as communications are concerned, because they might be calling forward something significant like a mass mobilization here within the near future. If that is the case,
It really seems like a mass mobilization is what they're trying to prepare for. It's very blatant, actually, what Russia is doing at this point, because the fact that they're going so far, like trying to go after Pavel, who is the founder of Telegram, and also they're trying to ban it, and they're trying to force everybody into the state-sponsored messaging application, which I believe is called Max Messenger. They're trying to force them over there. We're also seeing all kinds of crackdowns pretty much everywhere. Any type of media inside of Russia is also getting cracked down on quite a bit as well. And we're also seeing, of course, today, the massive change that they're now threatening to use nuclear weapons against Europe because they're claiming that Ukraine's going to get a nuclear weapon. It seems like they're certainly laying the groundwork for something major, and I still don't think it's nuclear war. Like, Russia does not want a nuclear war any more than anybody else does. It's simply not the case. So, I mean, it seems to me like a mass mobilization is probably highly likely, if not imminent at this point, based on this. But I mean, they're going after this guy badly. Like, saying he's aiding terrorism, that's going above and beyond.
It certainly is going above and beyond, and it is showing us that at the moment the Russians are trying to make sure to get control of the home front communication system as much as they can, so that way if they announce something major like mass mobilization and there's a lot of public pushback against it, they can actually surveil everyone via Messenger Max, which is the alternative to Telegram, and see exactly who is leading the charge against the Russian government and who to take out for the larger part as a result of that. We've also been able to see that there is also another big situation going on in the background right now that may be seeing generally why Russia is starting to take such drastic actions. We've been able to hear that, according to the Moscow Times today, Russian financial institutions have started to state that around 250,000 to 300,000 small businesses this year in Russia are forecast to shut down or basically close up shop due to the fact that they will no longer be turning a profit and they're actually going to be running in the red throughout the rest of the year. It's believed that these will mostly be cafes, bakeries, and some smaller service firms throughout Russia. Most of the businesses that would be affected would fall within that category. This is something that is quite interesting to put this out there for everyone, because the Russian Federation is very different than what you would see here in the United States of America, because a lot of people in America look at bakeries as sort of a higher end thing that cost a lot of money, but the truth of the fact is that that's actually a fairly American sort of a thing. Most countries within Europe, also including the Russian Federation, view bakeries as an actual essential store and an essential service. American bread that is shelf stable for months on end, or at least a month or over on end, is actually a bit of an oddity in the world and is not considered a bread product by most countries inside of Europe and also the Russian Federation. Bakeries, for that reason, are actually a staple industry and a necessity for the Russian Federation, because bakeries actually produce the very bread that Russians eat on a daily basis. Not only that, cafes and smaller service firms are also forecast to shut down as well, not only showing that the Russians are lacking money for necessities like bread, but they're also lacking money for other sorts of small luxuries like possibly a coffee or maybe some smaller services that they may need from time to time. This is showing that the Russian economy is already very bad off. If the Russian citizenry cannot afford a basic necessity like bread from a local bakery, a lot of Russians are well beyond living paycheck to paycheck. They're not even living hardly anymore, financially at least, and they're basically seeing that all of their bills are stacking up at this point. We already know that because of all the other Russian financial actions that have been taken over about the past 8 months, and it does appear that it's finally coming around to get them now, because we are seeing that this is an absolutely apocalyptic economic condition that is now evolving inside of the Russian Federation as of today. And this also comes on a very special day, at least for the time of the year that this is. This is the 24th of February of 2026. And way back in the day, 4 years ago, which is actually quite a long time ago when I think about it, the war in Ukraine officially began, or at least the invasion of Ukraine officially began back in February 24th of 2022 inside of Ukraine. Back then was a very different time, and it's actually kind of crazy, folks, because there was a little bit of footage that came out over the day of what the war looked like back then, and I'm not going to lie, folks, it looks totally different. I mean, if you looked at the Ukraine war 4 years ago and how it was being fought in that opening month, it's completely different to how the war in Ukraine is being fought in the present day right now. Crazily enough, we also got a picture from the Russians that no one has ever seen before, and it's this one right here of we believe it's a Russian SVO or a FSB sniper, a Russian army sniper, overlooking the city of Kyiv from Irpin. And this is actually a pretty wild sort of a picture. I'll actually show y'all where this guy is exactly. This guy was right here in Irpin in one of these high rises, somewhere around here, or somewhere generally around this larger area south of Irpin, or in this high-rise area right here, somewhere around there, and he was looking out and into the area of the high-rises that are right over here. Those are actually the very high-rises that y'all are seeing right there in that picture. The Russians were literally at the very gates of the capital of Ukraine, the gates of Kyiv. But before we get to that, I do want to make sure that we break for some breaking news that's coming out at this moment. So Matthew, what do we got?
Okay, so we have a little bit of breaking news right now. We're not covering the State of the Union address, by the way, but we have heard an interesting statement here that has apparently come out. We've been waiting for some statements about what the future with the Iran situation is going to hold, and we're hearing from the U.S. president, allegedly, and I haven't had a chance to listen to it on the video, but this is allegedly what he's saying. He said Iran continues to rebuild nuclear weapons, and they are pursuing their ambitions, which was one of the red lines that was previously set by the United States government, that they were going to go back in and strike Iran again, certainly, if they were doing that. So it seems to be he just affirmed. If that is the case, I got to hear it on video for myself, though, as I haven't had a chance to review it. But it sounds like he's saying that is the case, which almost certainly means that strikes are going to be taking place almost for a certainty, actually. So also the deployments seem to indicate that as well. So that is interesting. Also, he said, my preference is to solve the problem through diplomacy, but I won't ever let Iran have a nuclear weapon. So it sounds like the groundwork for it, by the way, but we'll have to wait and see what else he says about it, if he mentions this whatsoever at all. But pretty much that's the main thing we're listening out for right now in this speech, is what he's saying about Iran, considering that's literally almost zero ground or 0 hour for these attacks. So I'll let you know if I hear something else.
And we will have to see. But getting back to our coverage inside of Ukraine, this picture, once again, is actually pretty crazy because it's showing a war that was supposed to be won in 3 days. And there was a lot of people out there who believed that this war would have been won in about 3 days. And if you looked at this picture right here, it looked like it might have been in the bag for the Russians 4 years ago to the date. The Russians were literally outside of Kyiv. They were right here, right at this river, right here. And you know something that's actually a little bit crazy, folks, is that you can still see a little bit of the remnants of the war left over. And this is probably one of the most interesting ones, or probably one of the craziest stories that we could ever talk about. This bridge right here is the Irpin-Kyiv Bridge, and it crossed directly over, I believe this is called, let me see if I can get the name of it right here. I believe this is actually just the Irpin Highway to Kyiv. This bridge right here was the only bridge at the beginning of the invasion that stopped the Russian army from crossing directly over the river easily and on into Kyiv, which would have been through these forests right here. The Ukrainian soldier at that point in the war heroically sacrificed his life by detonating the explosives manually under this bridge, killing himself in the process, but also destroying the bridge and stopping the Russian army from crossing the bridge and making its way into directly threatening the outskirts of Kyiv. By that action of that one man and his one sacrifice, the Ukrainian armed forces were actually able to consolidate their positions across the Irpin River on the southern side and were able to stop the Russian army from advancing out of Irpin and on towards the very gates of Kyiv itself. This is actually something that's even crazier. You can see the little makeshift bridge that the Ukrainians built 4 years ago. It is still there, right there on the Irpin River, right next to the new bridge that has been constructed next to the destroyed one. I can actually think we can show you all. Yeah, here you go. Here's actually the pictures of it from about 2 years ago. The Ukrainians have largely left this bridge standing for the greater part, something as a memorial for the greater deal. You can actually see that they laid it down right here, that this is a memorial. I believe it's to Romansky Mist, who was the man who actually ended up taking his own life to blow up the bridge and stop the Russians from farther advancing into the city. And 4 years later, the Russians are nowhere near Kyiv. As a matter of fact, the Russians aren't even in Belarus, which is where the main offensive began that made its way to the city of Kyiv. And it does appear that the Russian Federation has not done well over the past 4 years. Over the past 4 years, since the invasion of Ukraine began, they have lost half of their held territory that they originally claimed during the first month of the war, and we've also seen that the Russian Federation has taken about 1.5 million casualties since that opening day of the war. It's really crazy to think that the war has been going on for 4 straight years at this point. It really is, quite honestly, the birth of this channel, as a matter of fact, because this channel, while it had existed for about 7 months prior, really took off at the beginning of the war in Ukraine and then later evolved into the World News Channel that a lot of y'all know today. But it's a crazy thing to see that even 4 years later, the Ukrainian armed forces are still standing, fighting, and generally giving the Russians a run for their money, of which no one ever believed the Ukrainian nation would be capable of. And a lot of people are still seeing that those echoes of 4 years ago are coming out from time to time, some that are quite rare to see, and this is actually going to bring us into our location unknowns a little bit early, just to show you all some clips that we have never seen before on the channel. And these are, crazily enough, from 4 years ago. Never been seen. I have never seen them. Maybe some people out there have seen them before, but these are exceptionally rare, and I wanted to show you all a glimpse of what that war looked like 4 years ago. It's a war that is basically unrecognizable by modern standards, with drone warfare becoming the predominant force on the battlefield. A lot of what y'all see in these clips right here couldn't be done in the modern day today. And showing y'all this is actually footage of a Ukrainian Mi-24 conducting a rocket strafing run on a Russian column on the road below. This was apparently within the first 3 days of the war. Here's the clip. And I'll have to mute the music, but you can see the rocket attack right there on the Russian column, and a second one at night near to the similar highway that was seen in the last clip. This is literally unheard of in the modern day. Helicopters from both sides can't even operate within miles of the front line any longer, much less directly overhead of an enemy column. It would be unheard of. As a matter of fact, Russian infantry columns or motorized infantry columns are literally unheard of at this point in the war because of their loss of supply trucks. For this reason, we see that the Russians are generally using what we call the rodniks, which are ladas and buhankas that have been heavily modified to be able to move their infantry around. Such Ural 4320s and Kamaz 5320s are literally unheard of at this point in the war, and also Ukrainian helicopters operating this close to Russian infantry, literally right overhead. We also get to see this other crazy clip, and a lot of y'all will remember this if you've been watching this channel since 4 years ago, because the Stugna ATGM was a hero of the early part of the war in Ukraine. And this clip right here shows us, and we've actually seen this one before, I remember this one from years ago. This actually shows a Stugna ATGM targeting and destroying a Russian Ka-52 while it was hovering, trying to fire at Ukrainian forces in the distance. Here's the clip of them firing the Stugna, and then directly slamming the Ka-52 with the ATGM, right there.
And his clip's from almost 4 years ago, you say?
These are from 4 years ago, just about. I mean, this, like, for one, I've not seen a Stugna operating on the front line for about 3 years now. And two, I've never even seen a Russian helicopter within visual range of anyone on the front line for about 3.5 years at this point. And we also got to see, this was a crazy one. This is actually in the Kherson region around Kudryavy, which is near to the city of Kherson. This was way back in the day when the Russians had actually been able to cross the Dnipro River, which is basically ancient at this point. The Ukrainians liberated the city of Kherson way back in December of 2022. And we were able to see in this clip right here, this was one of the also Ukrainian lightning counterattacks that generally threw the Russians off kilter. These civilians drove past a Russian convoy that had been absolutely obliterated after it had crossed the Dnipro River. There's a Ural 5320. You won't see any of those anymore. There's a Ural 4320. That's actually a command Ural right there, also destroyed as well. A Kamaz fuel truck. Another Kamaz transport truck. It's crazy to think that this was 4 years ago, because the war, folks, is literally entirely different in how it looks in the present day. It is basically World War I out there right now. Back then, it was a highly mobile war, at least for those couple of opening months. Honestly, over the entirety of 2022, it was a highly mobile war by both sides. But after 2022, the front lines got heavily solidified, and we saw that there was basically never any successes really by either side in gaining massive ground like both sides did at the opening of the war.
What's even crazier than that is, after all these losses and the 1.5 million men that are currently casualties in this war on the Russian side alone, after all of that, they control less land than they did at the start of the invasion, which is absolutely insane. They literally lost all those men, all this equipment, all these missiles, so destroyed their economy, destroyed their society, and pretty much everything, and ruined countless families because their sons and daughters are getting killed in this situation. All that simply to lose territory, which is probably why they're going so berserk now, threatening to nuke Europe and going berserk like that.
And let me see here if I can show you all this really quickly, because this is actually something that's just insane to see, considering that this is 4 years on. This was the amount of ground that they actually controlled at their peak, which was only about a couple of weeks into the war. This was around March of 2022. Literally just a month in that they controlled all of this territory. By April 1st, they had lost the entirety of everything north of Kharkiv. Literally everything north of Kharkiv was lost within 1 month of the opening of the campaign. Now, about, let's see, how many years would this be? 4 years later, to the day, the Russians now control half of the territory that they controlled at the beginning of the war. They control this now. That's it. They lost everything else that was north of Kharkiv. And what's even crazier is that there was a load of Ukrainian counteroffensives over the course of 2022 that were wildly successful in reclaiming ground. There was the General Kyiv counteroffensive that threw the Russians off so badly, they conducted a front-wide retreat from Kyiv on the 1st of April, which was a pretty funny April Fool's joke to see one. Then there was the Balaklia counteroffensive, or what some people call the Kharkiv counteroffensive of the summer of 2022, where the Ukrainians were able to clear out the Russian Federation from the area of Balaklia, which is as far as they had made it just to the east of Kharkiv and south, and were able to push them all the way back across the area of the Oskol River, and even push them back as far as Svatove across the Oskol River. Then we also saw some other significant counteroffensives as well that were conducted around Okturka and other directions near to this front. Actually, there's the Okturka front right there, which then saw that Sumy was generally relieved of the significant pressure that had been put on it, and generally liberated this area as well. And then we also saw that the Ukrainians were able to conduct a wildly successful Kherson counteroffensive over November and December of 2022, where the Russian Federation's armed forces on the western side of the Dnipro River completely crumbled in terms of their cohesion and conducted a flying retreat back across the river of the Dnipro, and have remained there since to this day. Over those next 3 years, after the end of 2022, the Russians have only gained less than about 0.7% of Ukraine's territory year over year. The best year that they had was 2023, where they gained 1.3% additional territory of the total of the Ukrainian territory that is currently within the state of Ukraine. And last year, we saw that it was only 0.7% of a frontline gain over the course of an entire calendar year. This is showing us that the Russians quite truly ran out of steam within that first year of the war, and I don't believe that they ever expected that the war would become this long and this costly. And 4 years later, they are still paying for the tectonic mistake that was made all the way back then. A pretty crazy sort of a thing. And a lot of people are generally talking about at the moment what is going to be happening here in the future as far as the Ukraine war. What will the future hold for the war in Ukraine? And Matthew, what are people thinking about that, considering that we're 4 years on now and it doesn't really appear that there's an end in sight, at least at the moment? And what are you thinking about it as well?
Okay, so we've been asking this exact poll question for exactly 4 years. Ever since the Ukraine war has been going, we've asked this question who knows how many times. So at this point, 4 years later, Ukraine is still fighting the war that was only supposed to last 3 days, according to U.S. experts and also the Russian officials. It's now gone on for not just 3 days, now it's gone on for 4 entire years, and it's expected to go on way longer than that. And Zelensky has given the order to prepare for at least 3 more years of hard fighting on the front lines. So how do you foresee it ending? 54% said with a Russian government collapse, while 20% said with Ukrainian battlefield victory, and 19% said with a negotiated settlement. So over the course of the 4 years, this opinion of mine has changed quite a bit. Before, I had said that Ukraine could not win on the battlefield, and that still generally remains true, but we are seeing Ukraine regain over 400 square kilometers of ground over the last month or so because of the communication crisis that Russia is currently having, which is completely unexpected, by the way, and it looks like Ukraine is still steamrolling the Russians back off the front lines in limited areas. So that's a big win for them. But at the same time, though, the real way I see this ending in reality is most likely with a Russian governmental collapse. And that can be a little bit risky because, of course, they do have nuclear weapons, and Putin is of the type of person that does not like to take a loss quite like that. So unless the Russian people rise up and overthrow Vladimir Putin, then we could be looking at a bit of a disaster on our hands here if the government collapses like that. So I would say I'm with the 53%. That is the most likely option here. Negotiated settlement, that'll never work as long as Putin's in charge. If Putin is in charge of that country, there will be no settlement. That's become clear as a bell. And also, a Ukrainian battlefield victory, that's still a little bit up in the air, in my opinion. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that I would generally be with the 53%. I think that it's going to be a Russian governmental collapse that will see the war end, because the Russians are not going to end the war regardless. And Putin has made it incredibly clear he's going to keep the war going until the end of time, or until he dies, whichever one comes first, which obviously he's going to die before the end of time, quite clearly. So with that in mind, it does seem that the Russian governmental collapse is probably what's going to be ending this war. And that will most likely come due to a significant economic collapse or an economic disaster that's already been in the makings for years now inside the Russian Federation, really ever since the beginning of the war. And it's becoming absolutely crucial at this point, the state of the Russian economy and the Russian domestic home front situation. So I would say that that would be my general opinion, is that the Russian Federation will probably see that the war ends through their own collapse. They're eating themselves alive at the moment, and if they continue to do that, it's not going to end up well for them. But moving us on out of the Russian Federation and the war in Ukraine, because we'll actually be getting back to all of the up-to-date news of what happened today here in a little bit, bit, I do want to make sure that we move ourselves on down and into the area of the middle of the East, because we actually have a lot of fairly significant news coming out of the Middle East over the course of the day. And of course, we do know that there is a lot going on in the world right now, and it also appears that we have more breaking news coming out at the moment, most likely about an additional foreign policy statement made in the State of the Union. And so, Matthew, what do we got?
Okay, so we have gotten another alleged statement from the U.S. president during the State of the Union address, so specifically dealing with Iran, because that's currently what we're waiting for right now. And it looks like I'll be honest, I haven't had a chance to listen to it myself, but it sounds like the president is really not making a full case to the American people about why we need to go to war with Iran, but he is making the usual statements. He's basically reiterating what he's previously said in the past. He says that Iran is building missiles that could reach the United States. He said, like I mentioned earlier, his preference is to solve it using diplomacy, but he will not let Iran have a nuclear weapon. And he does confirm that Iran is once again working toward that ambition, and he is not going to let the world's #1 sponsor of terror obtain a nuclear weapon. So it sounds to me, and he also did say, by the way, one other thing. He said that Iran will not say the magic words, that they will not build nuclear weapons. So it sounds like the attacks are a green light. That's what it sounds like to me. He's not going into a whole bunch of details. He's also not really saying really why it's imperative for us to go to war, but he's saying that they're building missiles. So I guess that's self-explanatory. So that's what we're hearing right now. So we're not getting any real significant details, but we're still hearing the same thing being repeated again. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd have to say that's a fairly interesting development, and I see some people deriding those comments in the chat about Iran building a missile that's capable of reaching the United States. Someone said, Iran cannot build missiles of that range, sorry. You know, a lot of people actually said that, funnily enough, about North Korea. And you know who in the world can get vaporized in a nuclear hellfire from the North Koreans? You and me. So, you know, generally, it's not good to try and underestimate someone, because it's not like these countries are absolute caveman. They do have the eventual ability to produce an ICBM. North Korea did it, so Iran could easily do it as well, and they're currently working on that right now. And we already know that they are, because they've made that claim publicly that they're working on an ICBM and that they're never going to negotiate with the United States on not developing an ICBM. So they are working on that. They do have the ability to do that, and it will only take time. And so generally, it is a significant national security threat to the United States of America with the Islamic Republic of Iran's nuclear and missile programs put into factor. I also have to remind everyone here that the Islamic Republic of Iran is not really a country that has a clean track record, is the best way to put it. Because if I remember correctly, a lot of people were demanding that the U.S. military go over there and basically invade Iran, because the Iranian government was slaughtering about 40,000 people over 2 weeks, just about a month ago. I don't know if people have short-term memories on that, but crimes against humanity generally open you up to military invasions. There really isn't a questionability of, oh, is that illegal or not? Because here's the thing. Did anyone ever ask that about the Holocaust? Like, did anyone ever go, oh, I don't know about doing anything about that, you know, maybe we need to, you know, work on that and think about it, have some thought groups going on. No, a crime against humanity opens up your country for armed attacks and an invasion, just due to the fact that they're slaughtering innocent civilians on the ground like there's no tomorrow. And I don't know why everyone keeps acting like that didn't happen. We all watched that happen live on air just literally a month ago to the day almost, and that alone in itself, outside of the nuclear threat, the ICBM threat, and also the continuous funding and sponsorship of terrorism throughout the region, clearly gives us more than enough reasons to be able to conduct military actions against the Islamic Republic of Iran, a sworn enemy of the United States of America.
Also, by the way, speaking, you just mentioned the casualty report from Iran. It does sound like the president did confirm the casualty report. This is one of the first official accountings we've heard of how many people were killed by the Iranian government during the protest. We're being told that at least 32,000 protesters were killed. Apparently, it's being quoted on Twitter as something that was said during the State of the Union. So, once again, I haven't had a chance to listen to it myself, but if that number is true, which is sort of lining up with what we heard from our sources, then this was a massacre of ungodly proportions that was conducted by the Iranian government, and they're saying it's larger than 32,000. So, I mean, give me a historical reference here, Enforcer. What would that match up to, like casualties in a war? That's like wartime casualties, just in the protest annihilations that we've seen.
Well, that'd be even greater. I mean, about 3,000 people just about were getting killed a day inside of Iran during the massacres that were going on. 3,000 killed a day. Around roughly about 400 Russian soldiers are killed per day in Ukraine, and about another 700 are wounded. So, I mean, this was far beyond anything. As a matter of fact, the massacres that were going on in Iran over that 2-week period were larger than the Tiananmen Square massacre of 1989 inside of China, which it reached international renown because of the brutality of that massacre, and yet Iran's was beating that nationwide on a daily basis. I mean, it's literally out of a pale of comparison. As a matter of fact, the amount of people that were dying in Iran every single day was actually around the same number of the amount of people that were dying every day from the Holocaust and World War II, to give you all an idea of the absolute brutality and horrendous actions that the Iranian government was conducting during those 2 weeks in the middle of January. I mean, when you're seeing numbers like that, I don't know who in the world could ever say, oh, I don't know about that, because I'll say this, folks. I don't get the whole hypocrisy of the modern day. People demand, they call for the U.S. government to get militarily involved in Ukraine and start bombing Russia because 2 or 3 Ukrainian civilians die on average every day in Ukraine from a Russian attack, or a dozen or maybe 2 dozen or so. But when 40,000 people literally get wiped out in Iran over 2 weeks, and then everyone wants to start going, I don't know, is there really a reason for us to do anything to them? It's like, yeah, sure there is. These people are absolute criminals. They're terrorists in charge of Iran. They kill their own people. They kill people throughout the entirety of the region. They kill Americans whenever they get the chance, and they're working on a nuclear weapon and an ICBM to boot to reach the United States of America. What more could we need at this point to be able to do anything against the Islamic Republic of Iran? There's nothing more that we could need. If we needed anything more, then we would literally have to need the destruction of the United States itself to then say, oh, now we can finally do something, and then by then, it might be a little too late.
Oh, well, it's coming. It's coming for sure. I think at this point, I don't think there's many people out there saying that a war on Iran is not going to happen. I think most people understand that it is in the cards. Like, it is definitely going to take place. The amount of assets, also, by the way, we're still seeing the F-22s going there tonight. Like, they're currently sitting in Israel. That's a massive thing we're about to get to in just a second with the Iran news. For the first time ever, there's F-22s, Stratotankers, all kinds of military assets for the first time ever stationed inside of Israel's borders, which is something highly unusual. We've not seen that before. So it's going to happen. We've also seen the embassies evacuate as well in the region. So it's coming. And also the statements tonight from the State of the Union indicates that it's definitely going to happen. I wish he would have gone into more detail, though, because really, honestly, since we're about to get into a war, he probably should have explained a little bit better to people why it's happening. Because most people, if you're not keeping up with it like everybody here on the channel, most people are going to be like, hey, what the hell? They're going to be shocked when they see us going to war with Iran. Most people in the country are. But the people that are following geopolitics closely will know why it happened, but everybody else won't. So that was kind of interesting. He chose not to really give too many details about the situation, probably for operational security reasons, I'd imagine, but it was very vague, to say the least.
And also, I have to keep in mind, folks, another thing. North Korea, we have to actually kind of say that it's a bit of a blessing that North Korea is as oppressive and brutal as it is. And I'll tell you all why. They're so oppressive and brutal that their government is fairly stable, even in the absolute squalor that it exists inside of North Korea. So they don't always have this high likelihood of firing off a nuclear weapon. Whenever they threaten that, they're threatening that to see if they can get some sort of concessions from the West to avoid a nuclear conflict as a part of their foreign policy strategy. Iran, on the other hand, is a radically theologically driven government in the Islamic Republic, and not only that, their government is extremely unstable. We can see that case in point over what's been happening over this whole year with the hundreds of thousands, if not millions of Iranians that have been taking to the street and generally actually threatening the Iranian government with an overthrow. A government like that is that fragile and could collapse at any moment has a much higher chance, statistically, of firing off a nuclear weapon either internally or externally at someone out of the blue than anyone else, because they might freak out and they might have to try and force control of the domestic situation, which will result in them using a nuclear weapon. Iran is not like North Korea. North Korea is a bad thing in itself to have a nuclear weapon, at least for North Korea's purposes, but Iran having a nuclear weapon, in terms of the unpredictability and the danger posed in that, is far greater, not only for our regional allies in the Middle East like Iraq, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, the UAE, Bahrain, and so on, the major oil producers also including Jordan, but also the United States itself on the home front if they get an ICBM, which they eventually will. If they have a nuclear weapon, folks, once they get one and they test it, that's it. There is no way to respond from that point. If we try to respond, the Iranians are going to hold a Middle Eastern country hostage. They are going to start claiming that they will fire off that nuke at either Iraq, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Israel, and they will kill millions. That would be the threat. And those countries are going to call us up and go, do not do anything to them. You're going to get us all killed, and we have no way to defend against us. So please, I pray to God, don't do that. Because I'll tell y'all, that's what South Korea and Japan does right now. Every single time the North Koreans threaten to nuke, they go, you can't do anything to North Korea, because if you do, they can easily nuke us. Y'all might have the GMD in the United States, which could shoot down basically all of North Korea's nukes before they reach the United States, but we don't. And so y'all cannot do any military actions against North Korea because they would nuke South Korea or Japan, so please don't. And that's what's going to happen in the Middle East. And once that happens, Iran has free reign at that point to take a couple of years to develop an ICBM, and there's nothing we can do to stop them at that point. And just like North Korea did, they'll eventually expand the range of their capable missile systems until they can reach the entirety of the contiguous 48 states of the United States, and then eventually all 50 states of the United States, just like North Korea did. It's a wildly concerning development, and this is probably, I would say, the most imminent threat that's posed to the United States of America at this point in time right now. Russia and China are very significant ones, but Russia and China are generally coming to a boiling point a little bit later. Iran's at a boiling point right now, meaning that as far as dealing with a situation that's the worst off and requires immediate attention, Iran is the one. This is one that we have to deal with. But with that, I hope that does address it the best I can, and it's actually time for us to get into the news inside of the Middle East. But before we do, folks, I do have to say welcome to everyone who's joining us at the end of the State of the Union. I see that thousands have joined us right as the State of the Union ended, so welcome. I hope that y'all enjoy it here. It's an interesting night of news. But before we get on into the rest of our news in the Middle East and around the world, I do want to make sure to take a brief moment to address a couple of questions in the chat. So, Matthew, what do we got?
All right, so jumping into our first three super chats before we get into our major Iran news, and we got some very massive news on Iran tonight. Our first super chat goes to none other than Sylvester the Cat, a longtime channel legend, and thank you very much, Sylvester, for that $365 support.
Dang.
Like 365 days in the year, it's $1 per day, and we appreciate that very, very much, Sylvester, and thank you for being a longtime channel viewer. And Sylvester said, hello, Matt and Enforcer. I've been with you since the first week of the war, and I believe Russia is out of T-80s in reserve, and use your crystal ball. How much longer can Russia last? Best guess, and least spring tanker forever.
And Sylvester the Cat, I thank you for the unbelievably massive support. And I also have to say that Russia is generally out of T-80s from what we know. And I'm going to tell you something that's absolutely hilarious. This is actually a bit of an irony. Basically, every T-80 that the Russians were using in the war in Ukraine was made in Ukraine decades ago during the time of the Soviet Union. It's actually a little bit interesting because the HTZ, which is the Kharkiv tractor factory, was the one that actually produced most, if not all, of the T-80s that were used in the Soviet armed forces and then later on in all of the post-Soviet republics. That's actually why if you look at Ukraine's army, and their actual indigenous tank force, it's basically all T-80s, is because they had access to the Kharkiv tractor factory, and for that reason, it made a lot of logistical sense to just operate T-80s because they had the factory to be able to produce the spare parts and keep them running. Russia, on the other hand, had I believe it was the Ural tractor factory somewhere out near Yekaterinburg, which was the one that produced the T-72 main battle tank. And there's actually some very significant differences between the two designs, and let me pull them up here and show them to y'all, because these are basically the main designs of both tanks that were used by Ukraine and Russia at the beginning of the war. But yeah, of course, one side used more T-72s, that would be the Russians, and then one side used the T-80s. The design concept behind the T-80 was generally come up with at the Kharkiv tractor factory of being a highly advanced, highly efficient sort of a main battle tank with a lot more armor and a good bit more maneuverability. It was mechanically more complex and a little bit, well, actually it was a good bit more expensive, but it was a qualitatively far better main battle tank than any other competitor that had been made during that period. Then at the Ural tractor factory, the Russians, the actual Russians in the Soviet Union, they came up with the T-72. The T-72 is basically, how could we call it, the Toyota Hilux of the Soviet main battle tanks. It's not really high-end like the T-80. The T-80 is qualitatively better in every way than the T-72. The T-72 actually used a diesel engine instead of a jet turbine. The T-80 uses a jet turbine. Its turret systems and components were also simpler, and also it was generally easier to repair and function at the cost of efficiency and also the cost of ergonomics and many other factors. The T-72 is a worse tank, but it was cheaper to produce in larger numbers. And so the Soviet Union actually ended up producing a couple of hundred T-80s and then thousands of T-72s. And at the beginning of the war in Ukraine, the Russians still had a few hundred of those T-80s in their army, and the Ukrainians basically used nothing but T-80s. We've seen now that the Ukrainians really don't use a lot of their T-80s. They keep them in reserves, the few that they have left. But the Russians, due to the fact that they don't really have a way to produce spare parts for the T-80s, due to the Kharkiv tractor plant in Kharkiv being in Ukraine, and also the fact that the Russian Federation has lost a lot of them, we basically see no T-80s on the front line at this point. They've most likely been withdrawn from service, the few that are left, because there's certainly a few that are left out there, maybe a couple of dozen, but there's so few of them and there's so few spare parts for them in Russia, they don't really use them anymore. We see that they use nothing but the T-72 series at this point, so it's either the T-72A, the T-72B, if they have any of those, the T-72B3, which is the one you'll see right here, or the T-90M, which is a heavily modified variant of the T-72. Then we're also seeing that the Russians are so desperate for equipment now that they've actually moved on to what we could call I guess you could kind of say like a mid-Soviet era standard, which is the T-62M. And let me give you all a picture of that. This one right here, these are actually from the 1960s. This was the Soviet main battle tank before the T-72s and the T-80s, and that's generally what they're having to use these days on the front, but we really don't honestly see any main battle tanks anymore. It's incredibly rare. It's like seeing a unicorn. So I hope that does address that the best I can, Sylvester the Cat. And a humongous thanks to you so much once again for that unbelievable support and helping this channel to keep on running. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to keep this channel running. We wouldn't be able to make this thing possible. And we wouldn't be able to talk about the fact 4 years into the war, the Russians are almost completely out of tanks. But a humongous thanks to you so much once again. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here goes to none other than Texan Lifelong. And thank you very much, Lifelong Texan, for that massive $200 support, by the way. And we appreciate that very, very much. That is massive support. And they said, I'm not that far from Mexico, and I'm concerned. And what are you guys thinking? And we are concerned here. So also, by the way, that was a huge news stream that happened on Sunday, by the way. That was literally the day that this whole situation broke out with the cartel, the CJNG in Mexico, because apparently the Mexican Special Forces went in and took out their leader, which was El Mencho. So that created a shit show, basically. That really turned into a bad situation. We're still seeing that happening today, by the way. It's not over with. The Mexican government's trying to make it seem like it's all under control. It is not. It is still out of control, and we're seeing major attacks still happening in Michoacan and also in Jalisco as well. So it's not under control. But the good news is, though, it's not near the U.S. border. We have heard of some isolated reports that some cartels that control the border or the Mexican side of the U.S. border apparently exploded some cars just to prove that they're still in control, basically as like saber rattling or flexing, basically. But generally speaking, the U.S. is perfectly fine. We don't see any signs the U.S. is going to be directly impacted by this, except for Mexico. They're obviously having a pretty big impact, even still today. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd have to say that the risk of anything really breaking out along the Mexican-American border, Texan Lifelong, is actually a little bit low from what we know. Because currently, right now, the cartel that is a bit of the trouble issue right now in Mexico is the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, or the CJNG that you see right here in red, which is generally around the central area of Mexico. This big area in white right here that they don't control is actually Mexico City. Mexico City has actually proven to be very difficult, if not impossible, for the Mexican cartels of any type to get into and operate in any heavy form. So generally, the cartels control what we would call the more rugged northern regions, mostly north of Mexico City, because you'll also notice that cartel activity within this southern area of Mexico is fairly light, even in the Yucatan Peninsula. There's a very big historical reason for that, but that's for another time. It's very deep. It takes like an hour and a half to explain. But outside of that, this is the trouble issue right now. It's the Jalisco New Generation Cartel. The rest of the cartels right now really aren't that big of an issue. And while there is fighting around the Mexican border, and I have to also point out that I've done a little bit of research, and after the capture of Ovidio Guzman, who was the son of El Chapo, who both controlled the Sinaloa cartel, which was this humongous cartel that basically controlled everything in northwest Mexico, north of the Jalisco New Generation Cartel. After Ovidio Guzman was taken into custody by U.S. Law enforcement agencies and then was thrown into ADX Florence, the Sinaloa cartel has actually splintered into multiple different cartels, including the Cartel Independiente Pendiente de Sonora, which is this one up here in Sonora, the La Linea, and also the La Maiza, which are the big three of the breakup of the Sinaloa cartel. They generally are all fighting each other to basically see who's going to be, I guess you could say, the throne holder of the Sinaloa cartel, or at least its remnants. So there is fighting that's always going on within that northwest area of Mexico, generally along these border regions where the cartels clash. But right now, that isn't really that big of an issue, and they don't really conduct a lot of actions across the U.S. border because they're more so internally focused on trying to reform the Sinaloa cartel under one of these families that's currently fighting right now. The Jalisco New
Oh,
Generation.
also, by the way, another point that we need to point out as well, the CJ&G has already appointed a new leader, by the way. So they did not splinter. Some people were thinking that maybe because they lost a leader, maybe there was going to be some type of splintering taking place. Apparently, they're very loyal within that cartel, apparently, from what we can discern from this whole situation. So it appears they're still very cohesive, which is dangerous for the Mexican government because the CJ&G is still on a warpath trying to get revenge for what they did to their leader. So we're seeing all kinds of stuff. I think they attacked a government building in Michoacan just a short while ago. And also they're saying they're going to do more damage as well. So the situation is not over. And the Mexican government is trying to keep it under control. Really, honestly, they're doing some pretty heavy coping about how much they have that truly under control because they really don't right now. So it seems like it's still a mess. And I'd heard rumors that they'd taken American hostages. I never got confirmation about that. And the U.S. hasn't made a statement either. But I had heard that there were some tourists that were apparently stuck, held hostage or something, if that's true.
And also, I do have to point out, that speaking of what Matthew was talking about here, that it, like a lot like Lucky Luciano, kind of militarized a lot of the mafias in New York City, and created the paramilitary structure that they had. The Jalisco New Generation Cartel is very similar in that it's almost a paramilitary organization. So they have a lot of discipline and structure at the moment. Over the decades, that might degrade a lot like the militant structure that was laid out by Lucky Luciano way back in the day in New York City, because the mafia isn't really similar to that these days, and it's quite smaller and has a lot less of a major footprint and impact on New York. But the Jalisco New Generation Cartel is incredibly similar to the paramilitary state that the cartel, well, more so the mafia, existed in New York City back during the times of Lucky Luciano. So they're not going to be breaking apart like the Sinaloa cartel anytime soon. They're actually well intact, and I believe that it's El Mencho's son that has been designated as the successor. So some sort of a family lineage going on there of the Jalisco New Generation Cartel at the moment. But I do have to make it clear, all of the heavy fighting that's going on right now between the Mexican government forces and the cartel is currently happening, I believe it's about a couple of hundred miles, it's like 300 miles away from the Texan border. So it's not going to be a big deal for y'all. And on top of that, the Border Patrol generally has the situation well under control. And if anything gets pretty nasty looking, I'm very certain that a lot of the governors along the border, especially the Texas governor, Greg Abbott, he'll most likely mobilize the National Guard and send them down to the border to patrol the area. And if any cartels try and cross, they'll most likely be shot on sight. So U.S. citizens, including yourself in Texas, should generally be safe from the chaos that's currently gripping central Mexico at the moment. So I hope that does address it the best I can. And a humongous thanks to you for the unbelievably massive support. I hope that does address that well. And I hope that it does little any fears that you have, because I hope that you aren't going to be in too much fear of it, because it is pretty far away from us all, what's going on down there around Mexico City at the moment. But a huge thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, it is time for us to move on and into the last question of this segment, and then we're going to be getting into the rest of the major news that we have for tonight. And so, Matthew, what do we got?
All right, so our last one of the segment goes to Hugh, who puts in a very generous $100 support, and thank you very much, Hugh, for throwing in that generous support, and we appreciate that very, very much. He said, "Guess who's back?" He said, "A little Wuhan whirlybird bug put up a fight, but Lieutenant Dan won the battle." And also, I'm glad to hear that, by the way. He said, "Sorry for missing a few shows, and I cannot believe that China gave Iran a high-end fifth-generation fighter jet. LOL, like Iran knows how to dogfight. And great to be back in LSA forever." Also, by the way, did they actually give it to him, or was it just a promise to give it to him at a future date?
Right now, I think it's a promise, but it basically is like effectively giving it to him. It's like that Russian batch of Su-30s that's never shown up yet. It's kind of like that. So it's going to be there eventually. It's just not going to be there right now. But hey, welcome back, Hugh. And I got to say, I'm glad to hear that you got over the Wuhan whirlybird, aka the COVID, because it's so many years on past now. YouTube doesn't actually have any restrictions on saying that. Woohoo! But beyond that, I got to thank you massively you for the support, you, and helping this channel to keep on running. And I also got to say, I'm glad to hear that you knocked that thing out and you're back in ship shape and Bristol fashion, as they call it. And it's perfectly fine to miss a couple of shows if you're sick like that. I completely get it. I actually got COVID twice back in the day, and it was bad. I mean, it was brutal. I mean, it beat me down really badly. Luckily, that was actually before we started to. Well, actually, no. I just remembered one of those times we were actually running the show. That was when we were in law school. Remember, Matthew? I took the test kit and it came back positive, and I actually had it.
I remember that. Yeah.
I think Matthew might have it right now. Like it's like.
Oh no, this little cough. That's all.
Matthew, did you have any of that delicious bat soup?
Oh no, I don't mess with that bat soup, sewer soup, or any wet market stuff. I don't mess with any of that.
Man, I got to tell you, man, wet market just doesn't bring up succulent to the mind. You know, like when you hear wet market, it sounds like something slimy. Like it doesn't sound good. But anyways, I would have to say I cannot believe that they promised Iran a batch of those myself. But we'll have to see if they ever fulfill that, because the Iranian government might collapse quickly enough that they never get them. Actually, that might be the case. So I'm kind of crossing my fingers and hoping that they actually, no, you know what? No. I hope that they get them before this goes down, which they'd have to get it pretty quickly, because if they got it before this all went down, when the Iranian government collapses, guess where those J-20s would find themselves? They're going to find themselves in the middle of an Iran that's no longer Chinese aligned. And you know what happens then? The U.S. takes a little Chinook, ties some, ratchet straps around that thing, and we just fly it out. And then we get one for free, and then we get to rip it apart and figure out what the Chinese have got going on in that little thing. So, honestly, I hope that they do get them, because the Iranians will never put them in the air. So we can basically guarantee they'll never pose a threat to the U.S. Air Force. And then secondly, we get to get one and take it home with us, kind of like we did the T-90As at the beginning of the war in Ukraine. So a huge thanks to you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. I hope that does address that well, and I'm hoping that that does happen, because if we can get our hands on the J-20, we're going to get a true understanding of how far along the Chinese are technologically. And I have a feeling that a lot like the MiG-25 back in the day, it's not going to be as advanced as we think it is. That would be pretty funny. But anyways, a humongous thanks to you so much once again, though, and helping this channel to keep on running, Nick. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to keep this channel running, and we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible. And so with that, folks, it is time for us to move on and into the rest of the news that we have from around the world. And that's going to be moving us directly on and into the Middle East. We have been able to see that over the course of the day, the United States has been conducting significant airlifts into the region, including F-22 Raptors, which did take off from RAF Lakenheath earlier today and flew apparently into southern Israel, which is shocking. I mean, that is literally mind-blowing. I'll tell you all why. Ever since October 7th of 2023, when Israel first entered our news coverage cycle, for 3 straight years, we have never heard or seen of U.S. Air Force aircraft being allowed to base and operate out of Israel. It's been verboten the entire time that we've covered news on this channel. As a matter of fact, it's largely been forbidden for U.S. aircraft to even fly over Israel over the entire time that we've covered this channel. And if you don't believe me, you can look at Flight Radar 24 the next time a C-17 is flying to Jordan. And you will see it actually have to fly through the Sinai Peninsula, around Israel, and then take a hard left turn and then start flying up towards Mu'afak. You will see it every time if you watch those C-17s conduct those flights. As a matter of fact, oh, look, there it is right there. Even still, they're having to fly around Israel to get to Jordan. So just to show y'all right there, that's still kind of the case. But they did allow these F-22s, apparently from what we've heard from Israeli news sources, to land at the Nevatim Air Base within southern Israel. This is the Nevatim Air Base right here. We've also been able to see that KC-135s have also been able to land and operate out of the Ben Gurion International Airport in Tel Aviv, which is right up here as well. We have some proof of that here in a minute, which we'll be showing y'all. But we do have the statement from the Israeli media, which did state that the F-22s had landed in southern Israel, according to the Israeli media reports. And we also were able to see that video footage right here of the U.S. KC-135 Stratotankers at the Ben Gurion International Airport, which you can see right there. We're not going to play the clip. We don't know about the copyright on this one, but you can see the KC-135s on the ground.
Man, I feel like Israel might be really shivering their timbers on this situation because for them to let U.S. Air Force aircraft actually base out of their international airport, that's a feat to say the least. I think that is the first time that's ever happened, pretty much ever for the most part. So they must really believe these reports because we keep hearing over and over from Israeli sources that they're worried that because of the massive amount of ballistic missiles that Iran has been able to stockpile since the 12-day war, they're worried that their air defense is going to get overwhelmed. So they must actually believe it's going to get overwhelmed because for them to let the Air Force station here, that's unprecedented.
This is quite literally unprecedented, and I'll tell you all so far what the U.S., or more so the Israeli standing on U.S. forces has been. They do not allow U.S. forces in Israel under basically any circumstances, unless if they think that Israel is about to be overwhelmed by something. Then and only then do they allow the U.S. Army's THAAD battery into the country, and they only allow it in a specific spot in southern Israel, and they don't allow it to go anywhere else, and they don't allow any other U.S. forces in. Apparently, they've now assessed that the threat is so severe to Israel that they're not just willing to allow the U.S. Army in to be able to try and defend Israel's airspace with our missiles. They're now allowing the U.S. Air Force as well, with the F-22s and the KC-135s, to also land in Israel and then use American aircraft and American missiles to defend their airspace. So a little bit of an involvement. We've actually been upgraded, folks, from a major defender of Israel to we are now apparently the American Israeli Air Force of Israel as well. And we're now allowed to base out of their country and shoot down any incoming missiles. But I also want to make it clear, folks, that the sort of weaponry that's allowed in Israel right now is purely defensive. F-22s are air superiority fighters, and F-22s are not going to be shooting down Iranian jets over Iran. They basically have none, and that would be taken care of by some other aircraft closer to that theater. These F-22s are only being allowed in Israel because if an attack happens, they're going to go airborne, and they're going to start using their AIM-260s, AIM-120s, and AIM-9s to shoot down the incoming Iranian missiles and drones that are flying over Iraq, Jordan, and Syria towards Israel. So even still, while they are allowing a larger number of U.S. forces into the country, they still are only allowing purely defensive forces in the country that can fire off weaponry on Israel's behalf to protect Israeli airspace, but still not allowing us any offensive capacity that would be based inside their country and then used against Iran. So, we're making some positive steps at the moment, but I think that there needs to be a lot more steps towards allowing any U.S. forces in their country to conduct any actions in the Middle East, because that would seem to be fair to me. That's just my personal 2 cents. But we've also been able to see that while all of that was going on in Israel, just a little bit north, the U.S. Embassy inside of Lebanon has apparently started to evacuate non-emergency personnel from the embassy, which is showing us that there are still war preparations being made at this moment. Additionally, we also saw satellite photography from Al Adid, which showed a generally emptied out tarmac. There was only about 4 KC-135s left at Al Adid today, and we also saw more telling satellite photography from the Bahrain Naval Station of the U.S. Navy. This satellite photography here is actually showing us that the entire naval station, at least for U.S. naval forces, has been evacuated. And funnily enough, the satellite actually caught a singular Arleigh Burke right there, actually moving on out of the Bahrain Naval Station and generally out of the Persian Gulf, which is showing us that the statements made prior that the Bahrain Naval Station was being evacuated were correct and the analysis was accurate on that. And this is showing that at this moment right now, all vulnerable U.S. forces within the region that were in perilous positions have been removed, and strikes could happen at any moment now. They could happen within the next day or the next few weeks. We can't really say for certain, but strikes are imminent at this point and can happen at any time, meaning that we will be on high alert throughout the remainder of the duration of this month and most likely the next month until these strikes commence. It does appear that based off of all of the telltale signs that we're getting right now from the evacuations of embassy staff and also vulnerable U.S. forces in key positions around Bahrain and Qatar, it's quite clear at the moment that something is going to be coming, and a lot of people are wondering, when is it going to happen? And Matthew, what are people thinking about that, and what are you thinking about that as well?
Okay, so we have seen confirmed footage showing U.S. embassy staff evacuating from the Beirut embassy, of course, in Lebanon. We have seen that taking place in the last 24 hours. And what's interesting about that is the last time the U.S. struck Iran during the 12-day war situation, during Operation Midnight Hammer, the Beirut embassy closed literally within 24 hours of the strikes taking place on Iran. So that's a big indicator. I'm not sure if it's going to be the same thing this time, but it is telling, though, that that embassy closed, because The reason why they closed that embassy, by the way, is there was a credible drone threat to the embassy, and they also detected some strange Hezbollah movements as well, which is the reason why they went ahead and told them to evacuate. And we saw all the staff, except for non-emergency personnel, for emergency personnel, they're the ones who stayed behind, actually. We saw all their personnel that were not essential, they left on a plane. So they're already gone. The embassy is with a skeleton crew at this point, and it's because of Hezbollah being in the area. Apparently, they're getting ready for something. So the question is, how close are the strikes now that we've seen these embassies be evacuated in the last 24 hours? 44% said the strikes will happen in the next 24 to 72 hours, while 23% said it's purely impossible to predict, and 22% said by the end of the week, and 11% said by the end of the month. Now, also, if you notice, by the way, there's a bit of a logical fallacy with this poll. The end of the month is the end of the week. So there's a bit of a problem. There's a bit of a problem there with that. So if you saw a difference, you were seeing things. Also, I was seeing things when I wrote the poll. Apparently, I have some seeing problems here. But I would say personally, I'm with the 23%. This is impossible to predict at this point. We have tried to predict it, and it's just impossible. Like trying to predict something right now with the way the U.S. admin operates in foreign policy, it's a fool's errand. Unfortunately, we would love to be able to predict it, but if we're being honest, we don't have that ability right now. Nobody does. Israel doesn't know. The Middle Eastern partners don't know. Nobody knows except for the U.S. admin. So that's the way it's going to stay, it seems. So I'm with the 23%. But Enforcer, what say you?
I heard that the U.S. is going to bomb Iran on Monday or Tuesday after they get done shoving hummus up your right. Oh, man, like, I gotta be honest with y'all, folks. I don't know when this is going to happen. All jokes aside, I have no clue. Right now, everything's been done to lead to strikes happening at any minute. And just to make it clear, there's a couple of clear signs that you can look for. The evacuation of embassy staff, which are vulnerable personnel. The evacuation of the Bahrain Naval Station and Al Udeid, which are incredibly close to Iran and therefore pose a bit of a defensive threat or a defensive weak link. So they generally evacuate all of those bases. And also the significant buildups of U.S. forces in the area, and also 2 carrier strike groups being available. So, with all that in mind, it's quite clear we could conduct strikes right now, like at this moment, if we wanted to. However, the problem is, I will tell you all this, is that we love to generally kind of hit people at night, because it's a lot easier to do that. You know, kind of think of like how, you know, someone gets mugged at night because it's dark and you really can't see them and it's hard to react and all that. It's the same sort of a premise with the military. We like to hit people at night. It's a lot harder for them to react that way. And also, some people might be asleep that are important and might need to be awake if they're getting bombed. So we generally bomb at night. Right now, it's daylight in Iran across the whole of the country, so it wouldn't be happening within the next few hours right now. It's probably going to be happening in the afternoon of tomorrow, or the next day, or the next day, or the next day, or the next day, so on and so forth, until either the end of this month or even the beginning of the next month. It could be any time, though, but it will be during the night, and there is a decent chance that it's probably going to be towards the latter part of every week, so sometime in between Thursday to Sunday, because historically we went back and looked. Middle Eastern campaigns that are long-term in duration generally start sometime around a Thursday. If they're short term, they generally start on a weekend and they end on a weekend when the stock market's closed. So it could be either one of those. It could be sometime in between Thursday to Sunday. That's a very likely window, but at this point, it could literally be any day, any time, but most preferably nighttime and towards the latter part of every week. So I hope that does address that the best I can at the moment. We can't get any more specific than that, and all I can tell you all is that at this point, it's going to happen any day. But I will tell you this. This is one important thing that you always should look out for. If it's not in the mainstream news, this is something a little bit important. I'm going to tell you a little bit of a secret. The government does talk to the mainstream news people, and they do kind of control them to a little bit of a degree. If y'all see that the mainstream news stops talking about Iran for a couple of days, and it basically disappears off of the news radar on mainstream news, it's about to get bombed. It happens every time. Like, we've watched it on the channel, and I've always told Matthew, it's when everyone stops talking about it, that's when they get bombed. That happened way back when the U.S. conducted Midnight Hammer for a couple of days. Basically, the mainstream news went silent on U.S. involvement or possible U.S. involvement, and then they got bombed. And that's how it's been conducted every single time. As a matter of fact, that was how it was conducted on Venezuela. Everybody went quiet in the mainstream news on Venezuela for days, and then Maduro got nabbed. So it's quite clear that if the mainstream news stops talking about this here soon, you can expect that within a few days of that, they're going to get bombed because they always want to make sure that people are paying a lot less attention to it. And they also want our adversaries to think that the U.S. has moved on to bigger and greater things. And then once that happens, they get bombed. That's when it's going to happen. So as long as people are yapping about it in the mainstream news, I can bet your bottom dollar they're not going to get bombed. As soon as they stop talking about it, that's when they're going to get bombed. So with that, I hope that does address it the best I can. That's really the last thing that we're looking for right now. And a lot of mainstream news outlets are still talking about this. So we know that it's not going to be happening anytime soon. So
Yeah,
we'll have to
also
wait and see.
Also, another thing as well is we typically look at the pizza index as one of our indicators to see when things are happening at the Pentagon. We have heard that apparently the Secretary of War is going to start buying loads of pizzas or ordering them from an app, apparently, to try to throw the pizza index off. I haven't said this before on the air because honestly, I did not want to tip him off so that way he could tell he was getting this wrong. But the way that works, by the way, is not by orders. So the Secretary of War can place as many orders as he wants on the pizza app or whatever app he's ordering from. It is not going to change anything. It doesn't mess with the whole busyness like indicator or anything like that. The way that's usually tracked by the tech companies is the amount of user cell phones near a location. That's how they usually check that data, and they tell you if a place is busy. So unless they plan on sending a whole bunch of Pentagon employees to the pizza joint to hang out there all night, then it's not going to mess the indicator up. So I've known that for a long time. I just hadn't said anything about it, but it seems like the Secretary of War did not know that. So he's been going around confidently saying that he's messing up the indicator about ordering pizzas, but actually he's not. So I guess the Pentagon gets to eat well, possibly, if they're actually picking the pizzas up, but it's not actually going to work.
Man, did he say that over the signal chat?
No, he said that on Fox News actually.
Oh man, I can't wait for the next Signal Chat League, folks. They're going to say, "Okay, everyone, the aircraft carriers aircraft are going to take off at 1400. Then they're going to bomb Kameni at 1600." It's like, oh great, it's like the whole war plan for the public, like literally a complete OPSEC violation, and then we're going to act like it's not an OPSEC violation. Good on him. Like,
man, he was confident as hell when he said it too. I was like cringing so hard. I was cringing so hard. He was on Fox. He was bragging about how all the methods they have to throw people off and stuff. We're just going to order a whole bunch of pizzas and that'll throw people off. I was sitting there thinking, I'm like, does he not know that they don't track it like that? They do not track the data about how busy the pizza joint is based on the orders. The tech company cannot see what orders are being placed on the pizza website. They can't see that. The only data they can see is when the user's cell phone gets close to the area for the pizza joint. So I'm like, hell, that doesn't even work like that. I'm like, what else is the guy saying that's BS? It's like, if he's saying that, it's like he just could be making the rest of it up.
I'm going to have to leave that because I can add a lot to that. I'm just going to leave it at that. Also, by the way, I just wanted to say this as well, folks, because there's already been some murmurs out there. The people on the Ford are pissed. Like, I've been hearing about that lately. I'm sure a lot of y'all have been, because like I was telling you all, and I remember telling y'all this. I was like, that would be highly unlikely for them to send the Ford over to the Middle East because they've already been on an 8-month-long deployment, which is fairly long, and we like to keep them around that length because if they go any longer than that, a lot of people on that ship are going to start getting pissed. And they're well-trained, they're well-skilled, and a lot of them are not going to re-enlist if they get shafted like that. And we're now hearing that a lot of them are sending letters back home from the carrier, basically telling their spouses and their family, "I'm absolutely pissed, this completely sucks, and I'm probably going to reconsider enlisting." And it's like, well, what do you know? It's like, I could have told you that. If I was the president of the United States, I would have said, well, if the Ford is going to take this long to get there at this point, why don't we just rush the bush through its carrier preparedness drills and then send it over instead, since they haven't been on an 8th-month deployment, and bring the Ford back home so that way all of these guys don't get pissed off. So it's like, I guess that ended up being the case. And apparently the toilets are also overflowing on the Lincoln.
That footage is old footage, by the way. They're reposting footage from like a long time ago, and they're trying to pretend like it's today. They're having toilet issues on the aircraft carrier, but it's not overflowing where there's like
Septic,
a situation where it's like flooded like in there. It's not like that. But I've heard though that the logic behind keeping, I think is it the Ford that's on the extended deployment or the Lincoln?
It's the Ford right now.
Yeah, so I've heard the logic behind that is they believe if they keep the sailors in there pinned up in the aircraft carrier for a long time, that they'll be so angry and so agitated because they want to get off the ship that they'll be a real fierce war fighter. They'll go after Iran harder than ever because they're pissed and they want to take their anger out on somebody. So that's the logic. I guess that's the logic behind it, perhaps, because I think the sailors are getting pretty angry and they're going to be pretty fatigued already because they've been on the boat for a long time. So now they're going to go into a full scale war already fatigued. So maybe they'll be a little bit more anxious to fight, or they'll be not wanting to fight. One or the other. We'll find out.
And also, I see a lot of people going, "Wah, they're on a carrier." Hell, are you in the armed service? Like, it's like, are you in the armed service in the Navy on a carrier? Like, everyone I've talked to, they're like, "Man, you kiss the ground when you get off a ship because after being on one for just 8 months, it's terrible." Like, it's not like, you know, like, and a lot of people always go, "Oh, I was in the army for a year," like in Kuwait. It's like, well, yeah, but being in the army in Kuwait for a year is very different than being on a carrier for a year. You know, very different sorts of environments. You know, like for example, have y'all ever thought about this? But the air on aircraft carriers, kind of like submarines, but not to the same degree of submarines, is kind of stale in some places because there's not great ventilation. Like there's not absolutely fantastic ventilation through most of the carrier, so they're having to deal with stale air. They're then having to deal with somewhat mediocre food for 8 months. There's no, you know, there's really not a lot of eateries on board a carrier that are just, you know, over the top. I mean, there's maybe a couple of fast food stores on there, but even those I've heard are a little bit subpar compared to the on land variants. You know, being on a ship really is tough business. I mean, if you've ever looked at historically what branch is usually the hardest to serve in, it is the Navy and then by extension the Marines, because a lot of those guys are on board ships, and ships are some of the most brutal sorts of environments to be in a long duration of time, either in the modern day or way back in the day during the age of steam or sail. It's been tough for everyone on ships. So I mean, you know, I'd say, you know, generally I would have brought the Ford back home and just sent the Bush instead, because that would have made more sense to me. But you know, I guess they know a little bit more than myself, and we'll probably see a lot of these guys don't re-enlist, unfortunately. But anyways, with that, it is time for us to move on out of the carrier business, and hopefully everything will go well with the carriers, all things considered. I mean, it's not like they're going to mutiny. I mean, that's one thing that's for sure, but, you know, still, it's not great to have a whole bunch of pissed off sailors. They're not going to re-enlist, and they're highly skilled, and they've already been trained, and it costs a lot of money to train those guys. So, anyways, moving on from that, we were able to see that the Prince Sultan Air Force Base in Syria, well, in Saudi Arabia, sorry everyone, actually does have a large amount of aircraft that are visible and in the wide open, including these 6 E-3 AWACS aircraft. That is a lot of AWACS.
That's a hell of a lot right there, really. That's a crazy amount right there.
Yeah, and 15 Stratotankers to boot, and some of them appear to have not been on the tarmac, but are operating from this airbase based off of how these are generally laid out. This is quite a large number of them, and I'd have to say that this is once again showing us the U.S. is well and ready for strikes on Iran at this point. And that many AWACS is crazy. I think the last time we've seen this many AWACS in the Middle East would probably been, most likely would have been during the invasion of Iraq in 2003, if I'm not wrong. But moving on from that, we've also been able to see that around the area of Baghdad, it appeared that there was a large amount of flights being diverted from the area. You can see them right there. We then heard later, apparently according to the Iraqi authorities, it was a malfunction on the runway, resulting in the suspension of takeoffs and landings. So we don't know what the malfunction was, but apparently that's what they're claiming it was for all the flights that have been diverted. And let's go check on the Baghdad airport right now. Is it retaking flights? Oh, it is. We actually see an aircraft going out here onto the runway to take off right now. So it does appear that the Baghdad airport, it has been reopened, and also the air corridor is still open in Iraq, which is showing us that at the moment there is still not really a chance of a strike or a war happening right now. But moving on out of that, we've also been able to see, moving us on down into Saudi Arabia, that apparently other analysts, including ourselves, are saying that, also, by the way, this isn't an analyst, this is apparently a U.S. Army official that stated this, by the way. Let me make a clarification there. Speaking on the condition of anonymity, he assessed that the forces across more than a dozen countries appear positioned and awaiting a presidential go-ahead. He describes the posture as consistent with preparations for sustained combat against Iran, while stressing no final decision has been made as senior leaders brief Congress. So it does appear clear at the moment the U.S. is poised to strike. It's just a matter of time at this point. We also saw a MQ-4 Triton of the U.S. Navy conducting orbits over the UAE for unknown reasons, but they are conducting the orbits. So with that, That is generally our external situation with the U.S. armed forces and the Israelis inside of the Middle East. But then we have to get on into the news of what the U.S. has been doing outside of the Middle East and inside the Indo-Pacific. But before we get on into that, we do have a poll to cover. And a lot of people are talking about apparently that the Pentagon has warned against extended strikes on Iran. And we're wondering, do y'all believe that or do y'all not? And Matthew, what are people thinking about that? And what are you thinking about that as well?
Okay, so we had a little bit of a covfefe breakout yesterday. There was a story running the mainstream media that a Pentagon official, apparently a top official, had allegedly leaked to the press that they were worried and concerned that extended strikes on Iran may not be a success. And they were also apparently expressing that to the White House, at least according to the report. So, do you believe the claim? 42% said no, the Pentagon knows that it can handle the situation, while 33% said yes, the Pentagon is feeling very worried, and 15% said I'm 50-50 on the claim. And this one is a little bit interesting because we had seen immediately after this report ran, the president came out and pretty much dispelled the myth, or at least he tried to dispel the myth for the most part. But the problem is, though, the president is speaking on behalf of people in the Pentagon. We didn't hear directly from the Pentagon about the situation, so we don't know exactly what they're really saying. But obviously, someone from the Pentagon can't come out and say something like this and attach their name to it, because if they did that, they would have probably a career-ending situation on their hands. So they don't want to do that. The best they could do is anonymous. So I would say that I feel like there probably are some of the Pentagon that feel a little bit concerned about the situation. But ultimately, though, I do believe the Pentagon knows they can handle it. But there may be some underlings that maybe are not feeling as confident as the Joint Chiefs. That's my guess. So I'm with the 42%, generally speaking. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd have to say that I'm with the 42%. The Pentagon can clearly handle it. If there's any sort of a hesitancy about it, it's probably, oh no, we were in Afghanistan for 20 and Iraq for 10. It's like, well, yeah, that's unfortunate for you mentally, but that doesn't really have any impact on the current situation today. So, it's like they need to get over that. But I think that's probably the reason behind it. We clearly have this in hand. And as long as we deal with the transport erector launchers and their air defenses and their Navy off the bat, those three main targets, the Iranians are easy pickings after that, after the first opening week. So, that would be my 2 cents on it. I think that the U.S. can easily handle the situation with Iran. Because if Iran is hard for us to handle, how in the world is the U.S. supposed to handle China? That's my question there. So I think that we can
Well,
easily.
I don't think they're necessarily worried about the U.S. not being able to take on Iran, because the U.S. and the amount of assets that we have in the region, we could pretty much take Iran down to the rubble for the most part. We have a ton of assets there. We could do some serious damage to Iran. The problem, I think, what the Pentagon's worried about is they're worried about the retaliation that Iran's going to conduct against U.S. bases, Israel, and also the partner nations in the region, and perhaps maybe even Europe as well. That's what they're concerned about. But even at that, though, I mean, they've had months to send in air defense, which they've definitely done that. We've seen it on satellite. They've sent in a ton of air defense. They've also taken it from other regions of the world and put it in the Middle East. That's how much air defense is there. We've seen also the fighter jets have showed up. We've got 2 aircraft carriers there. We even have fighters stationed in Israel itself, which is unprecedented. So, I mean, if we can't handle the retaliation with all that in the region, then I'm not sure why we would take Iran on in the first place, because that would be pretty dumb to take on a country that could overwhelm all those assets. So I think they can handle it personally. It's probably just some folks second guessing it because they don't want to be on the failing end in case it goes wrong. They don't want to get blamed for it, so they're trying to cover their ass.
Also, another thing that I have to say, someone said in the chat, well, Iraq was supposed to be an easy deal. It was, and it should have been. But due to a whole bunch of stupid decisions that were made after we successfully invaded Iraq, then it became a 10-year ordeal. And this is actually where the mess up was had. And this is something that a lot of people don't know, because this is more so in the details, but it's in the details that the devil lies, as the old figure of speech says. Well, after we successfully invaded Iraq, and we did wildly well in the actual invasion of Iraq in 2003, then came the occupational period where we had to hold the place down for an interim government to form. And because at the time, the Bush administration was thinking that there was going to be political pushback on the home front to keep a large amount of U.S. forces tied up on a 50-to-1 occupation style, where there was one U.S. soldier for every 50 inhabitants in Iraq, which would keep about 500,000 U.S. troops tied up inside of Iraq, really over the next several years, mostly the next 3 years. They decided to go with a much smaller force, where they only had about one U.S. soldier for about every 180 Iraqis, which meant that we had about 200,000 U.S. troops in Iraq after 2003. And that's where the shit hit the fan, because there were so few U.S. forces in the country that once we disbanded the Iraqi police, the Iraqi National Guard, the Iraqi Army, and every other government institution, most parts of Iraq were literally lawless. There was no U.S. forces there to maintain law and order as peacekeeping forces, and there were also no Iraqis there either that were maintaining any form of law and order. Because of that, a whole bunch of these nutty guys that Saddam Hussein had as his bodyguards, called the Fedayeen, went and basically started to raid all of the unprotected Iraqi army armories throughout the country. And they just started to arm themselves to the teeth. They would go get shoulder-fired anti-tank weapons, as much rifles and ammunition as they could carry, vehicles, and everything else that they could, and they would eventually become the very insurgents that we were fighting in Iraq. And also, they were the ones who generally started to spawn out of them ISIS, the general forces of Al-Qaeda that continue to exist in Iraq, and al-Nusra and all the other groups that we see today. That's generally where they came from, and it was because of the failure of the United States to follow through. Here's the thing about this. If you go into a military operation like this, you have to accept that it has to be done well, no matter the political consequences on the home front. It's better to keep 500,000 U.S. soldiers in Iraq for 3 years than to keep 200,000 U.S. soldiers in Iraq for the next 10 years, because you completely bungled it right after you successfully invaded a country. It has to be done correctly, and that was the problem with Iraq. It should have been easy. It should have been a walk in the park, and we should have been able to rebuild the government easily with an interim government and leave within about 3 years. But because of us trying to cut corners and cheaply and quickly deal with it, and also not get a lot of political pushback by keeping a lot of U.S. forces overseas in Iraq for a couple of years, we ended up screwing ourselves over, and we ended up staying there for 10. And that's why Iraq didn't end up becoming easy. But with that, it is time for us to move on out of that summary there, an important one. But I would say that that's generally what the people in the Pentagon are probably worried about, is something along those lines. But if they just do it right, and do it right the first time, you won't have to worry about it going wrong, because there's basically a tried and true formula out there for how to do this successfully. And as long as they follow that to a T and they don't try and cut corners, there's no way for this thing to go wrong, really. But with that,
You think Israel's going to whip out nuclear weapons if they start getting overwhelmed? Because that was one thing I heard people discussing today. And I will say, when people mention using nuclear weapons, most people are like, "Oh, come on, they're not going to use nukes." And also, it's never really been fully confirmed that Israel even has nukes in the first place. It's kind of like an open secret that they have them, but it's really not confirmed officially. But if Israel starts getting overwhelmed, I would say the odds of them using something like that is something that you probably should not ignore for the most part. Like, it sounds crazy, but at the same time, you gotta watch out. Because I'd heard a rumor today that apparently China is working on selling anti-ship missiles to Iran. Apparently, they're finalizing the deal, or they could be in transit, as far as we know right now. So, I mean, it could go sideways. Perhaps we'll have to wait and see, though.
Yeah, it could go sideways. We would generally have to see on that. And I see some people saying, "Well, what's the formula? What's the formula for an occupation?" The formula for an occupation is that there has to be one U.S. soldier for every 50 to 80 occupants or citizens of the country each. That was the Grenada model, and that was also the Panama model for occupational forces, and those worked exceedingly well. And we generally use those elsewhere whenever we needed them, after Grenada and also after Panama, up until the invasion of Iraq in 2003. And then that's when we saw that entire concept was completely thrown out of the window. And then we went with the one U.S. soldier for every 180 citizens, which is far too few U.S. soldiers for a proper occupation to keep the country under control. And that's when everything went haywire, because we left a load of vacuums throughout Iraq due to the complete lack of U.S. forces in the country. So there is a verified, tried and true formula. It's the Grenada and Panama formula. One soldier for every 50 citizens, or one for every 80.
But on the nukes, though, but like what I was mentioning there, what do you think about the nukes, though?
That generally is a bit of a risk, but with the amount of air defense forces and air forces that we have in the area defensively, I mean, they would never be overwhelmed. I mean, the U.S. would largely absorb most of the drones and missiles in the outer perimeter before they even made them into the Israeli air defense perimeter.
Interesting. I personally think that I think that Israel might be itching to make an example out of Iran, perhaps. We'll have to see, though. I don't want to falsely accuse Israel or something like that. But I mean, if Iran start, I mean, the last time during the 12-day war, we saw them getting overwhelmed a good bit, actually, by the Iranians with the drones and the missiles. And also, Iran whipped out their hypersonics, which actually got through the air defense a couple of times as well. And there was some significant damage inside of Israel from a result of that. So I don't know. Like, I feel like if they do anything crazier than that this time, we could see Israel perhaps do something that drastic, perhaps. We'll have to see, though, how this goes. That could be part of the concern that folks are having in the Pentagon while they're speaking out.
Yeah, I mean, but at the same time, though, if they nuked Iran, then they're a nuclear-armed country, and now they're officially a nuclear-armed country. They're not an unofficially one like they're one right now, and that means that they would be in technical violation of the non-proliferation treaties, and basically all of their international support outside of the United States would completely collapse overnight.
Maybe so, but I don't know. Like, I just feel like when it comes to like people like not supporting Israel, it seems to never really happen. So I think Israel has enough pull where it wouldn't be a problem if that became known. And also, if it was something that was a existential threat, they would have justified in their heads using it if they had to use nukes.
Yeah, that's true as well. That's pretty true. But with that, folks, it is time for us to move on and out of this a little bit of news and on into Indo-PACOM, because we actually saw something interesting here as well today. We saw on flight radar these KC-135s heading back home. We believe this is towards Anderson Air Force Base in Guam, or somewhere similar. And a lot of people are probably wondering, why are they heading back home? Well, that's because earlier they had actually transported or ferried over to Diego Garcia a decent little number of F-16CMs. Here's a video showing these F-16CMs off. Take a look. They're pretty neat.
Oh, dear.
These F-16CMs are specialized aircraft for the suppression of enemy air defense, also called SEAD for short. These aircraft are made to be able to operate a wide variety of electronic warfare pods, and also the famous AGM-88 HARM anti-radiation missile that locks onto enemy radars and destroys them from about 100 miles away. These aircraft are incredibly important for air operations against the Islamic Republic of Iran because they are able to slam dunk Iranian air defenses and largely open up a path for other U.S. ground attack aircraft to start slamming other forces. So I would say that in my honest assessment, this is another indicator here that they're getting incredibly close to conducting military operations against Iran. We also were able to see at Diego Garcia today some satellite footage, once again provided by the Huazhao Bingqiling satellite, that once again showed us a couple of P-8 Poseidons, a KC-46, two KC-135s, and a couple of C-130s. We believe that the C-130s are actually the specific MC-130J Commando 2 variant, because we'd actually reported on those going to Diego Garcia way earlier on, about a couple of weeks ago, and it looks like they're still there at the moment, hanging out. So we'll have to keep an eye on them and see what's going on down there at Diego Garcia. But that was their satellite photography that came out today right before the F-16CM showed up. Moving us on into Iran, we've also been able to see some really interesting developments in Iran today. For starters, it appears that the Iranians are trying to stall for more time because now, according to the country's deputy foreign minister, Majid Takht Ravanchi, he has stated that Iran is ready to take any necessary steps to reach a deal with the United States. Wow, he hit the magic words, Matthew. Let's make a deal. Bing! Stop the brushes, send them over. Like, it's going to happen. It's going to happen. And it appears that they're going to be talking it out again. Although everybody knows that this isn't going anywhere. And if y'all want to know how much people have little to no faith in this, the Turks are already preparing to basically invade Iran if the Iranian government collapses, to create a sanitary zone to stop refugees from crossing into Turkey. Now, this is actually something that's a little bit funny because a lot of people think that this was a European thing back in the day during the Syrian Civil War. A lot of y'all will remember, way back in the mid-2010s, there was this huge argument being had in Europe about the Syrian refugees because there was millions of them that entered Europe, and people were going, these people, you know, they haven't integrated into our society, they don't really seem to be compatible. And then there were other people saying you have to be compassionate to them, they came from a war zone, they were facing certain death, we have to be a little bit understanding of them and help them out just to be generally humanitarian to them. But one thing that's kind of funny about that is that I think Germany took on about 1.5 million of them Britain took on, I think about 750,000 of them or so. France took on about 1.2 million. Do y'all know how many the Turks took on? Matthew, take a rough ballpark estimate. How many refugees, Syrian refugees, ended up just sticking around in Turkey?
Let's see, maybe like 500,000.
9 million.
Damn.
Yeah, it was a literal flood. And this was a huge problem because while everyone in Europe was talking about this, the Turks were absolutely blown away by this. It completely absorbed most of their government's spare resources because by international law, they have to try and help out the refugees with some minimum food and shelter. And so the Turks just got pissed. They were like, we need to do something about this. They're eating up resources, and also they don't really seem to be compatible with Turkish culture. So what they did is that they created what was called the sanitary zones inside of Syria, which were those little kind of like front lines, if you want to call them, that existed up here north of Aleppo. Y'all, I'm sure a lot of y'all remember this. Y'all remember those big dark green areas that I had in northern Syria that were under Turkish control? Those were the sanitary zones. And so what they did is that they took all 9 million of those Syrians and they just shoved them into those in giant refugee camps, and they told them, you can't enter Turkey, and y'all just gonna have to sit here and wait it out. And that's what they did. So after that, the Turks realized, damn, if anyone else collapses around us, we just don't want to deal with the humongous amounts of refugees that are going to be flooding the country. So according to what we've heard today, the Turkish government has already drawn up a war plan to where if the Iranian government collapses and they think that things are going to be going badly, they're just going to go ahead and invade northern Iran and create another sanitary zone. So as soon as the refugees start flooding into the area, they just stop them there, throw them into camp, and then keep them there until the situation stabilizes in the rest of Iran, and then they're going to withdraw afterwards. So they're already getting a contingency plan going, which means they already understand that this is most likely going to turn into a war, and the Iranian government is in a fairly precarious position at the moment. And so with those two things considered, they're already getting ready to make sure that basically no refugees enter their country like last time when they basically overwhelmed Turkey a couple of years back.
Yeah, honestly, it seems a little concerning, it really, because I understand they don't want refugees in their country, but at the same time, though, Turkey seems to have a little bit of a knack for invading. Like, for example, they did the same pretext in Syria, like you mentioned, and they want to do the same thing in Iran. It seems like they're almost trying to grab land, almost like not really trying to stop the refugee situation. It seems like they're trying to grab land to expand. That's the way I interpret it.
Well, yeah, but we do have to remember, though, and I do have to point out that the Turks have withdrawn from the sanitary zones they had in northern Syria. They actually did that, I think, a couple of weeks ago. So they don't actually control any territory in Syria any longer.
They withdrew all their forces?
Yeah, like that's all under the control of Assad's regime now.
Interesting. I hadn't heard about that. That's
Well, not,
news to me.
not Assad. What the hell's his name? What's the name of the guy down there, man? Jelani. That's the
Jelani?
name. Yeah, that's the name of the guy. Not Assad. I'm thinking of like yesteryear. But they gave it all over to Jelani. Like the Turkish forces actually withdrew. So technically, all of that land is now under Jelani's direct control, and that was something that the Turks coordinated with him actually, because once he started that campaign against the SDF in the northeast, the Turks actually just withdrew and gave over all their territory to Jelani to be able to operate out of against the SDF.
Well, what if it's someone, since the Turks are generally aligned with Jelani, let's say someone gets in charge of Iran and Turkey invades the northern part of Iran and takes some territory to create a buffer to keep the refugees out. Let's say someone gets in charge of Iran that they don't like and that they don't agree with. Are they going to try to keep that portion of Iran because they don't like the person, or are they going to let them have it back even if they don't agree with who took charge?
Nah, they would eventually give it back because it wouldn't be good for one, for international law, and two, for making them out to be a general well-to-do nation in the area that looks out for everyone, because they're still trying to sphere build. So if they look like they're openly overt and aggressive, that will generally hurt their national interest in trying to sphere build and look like a partner that a Middle Eastern country could have confidence in. So they probably would maintain that territory for a little while, but once the government was secured in any form in Iran, they would probably immediately start to relinquish the territory right back to whatever government took charge.
Why can't they just keep their own borders, though? I mean, what's the problem with simply fortifying their borders like any other country would do that wants to, keep the refugees out? Simply fortify the borders, add more security, and just beef it up some extra. What's the need to go invade other countries' territory to try to create a sanitary zone, a buffer zone, or whatever they want to call it? That seems to be going a little bit out there on a limb, I would say, which also makes me very skeptical. Because for one thing, I'm very skeptical of Turkey in general, because Turkey has its own ambitions, as we know, and also Also, they don't really know where they stand. They keep flip-flopping, as Turkey's known for. They flip-flop, and Turkey does Turkey things. So you want to be very careful about letting them go a little bit too crazy with that, and that's why I'm skeptical.
I mean, that's a good reason to be skeptical, but at the same time, they did give the land back in Syria, so it does look like it's generally a temporary arrangement for the most part. However
If they
long.
agree with the person in charge, that is, because they agree with Jelani for the most part. But, like for example, let's say Pahlavi gets in charge of Iran and they don't like Pahlavi. Are they going to keep the territory because they don't trust him? I mean, it's a legit concern.
Yeah, it is a bit of a legitimate concern. But I guess we'll kind of have to cross that bridge when we get there and see what the Turks do. Because I mean, technically, if they try and keep the land forever, that's technically in violation of international law, and then they would get condemned and all that stuff.
Yeah, Turkey's been riding the fence so long and getting a little bit of flack for everything because they sort of piss everybody off. It seems like I think they're used to it. I don't think they would take too much offense to getting international condemnation. They'd probably just be like, yeah, we're used to it. We'll take the land and keep it anyway, and everybody can just piss off.
Man, bro, the absolute like regale of the Turks. I mean, honestly though, the Turks are like a questionable bunch. Like at least governmentally, they're basically a double agent and a wild card most of the time. We can't, like, as we always say on the channel, the old saying here is, folks, y'all know what it is. Turkey does Turkey things. So we don't know what they would do inside of Iran, but that's currently what they're talking about right now, at least. But moving on from that, because we have to press on, because I just realized we have all the war in Ukraine and also the Jalisco news to cover. But moving us on into Iran, we have also been able to hear, getting us back into the government statements that came out today, that the CIA, our great friends of the CIA, have put out a wonderful little video in Persian to help out the folks in Iran. Let's watch it, folks, and see what the CIA had to say. Oh, it's very cryptic looking.
Anya.
Oh, was securely contacting the CIA? Arabic CIA. Like, bro, it's just in English, CIA.
And they're bringing out the ancient scrolls right here. This is the ancient scrolls for contacting the spies. Look at this. Oh
Man.
man, I think they have a way set up like where you can go to the Tor router and you can go contact them. They have like an onion address for their communications thing. I think they set that up. Also, I think they set up. I don't remember if they had a Telegram or not. I think they did have a Telegram at one point. They might still have it, but they set up different communication methods for different ones. Also, by the way, look at that incognito mode, private browsing. Look
Man,
at this.
like,
Just a little bit of English in there.
I gotta say, folks, I always find it hilarious when like English words are just inserted into a foreign language in a sentence. Like if you were listening to this normally, you'd be like, private browsing, about incognito mode. It's like it just sounds so funny to me for some reason. Like someone did a great meme on that a while ago. It's like people speaking Japanese, and then they're speaking Japanese, and then out of the middle of it, they're like Whopper. It's hilarious to me. But anyways, they are telling them how to get into incognito mode, because that clearly stops anyone from seeing your internet activities. We all know that. But anyways,
And the only thing incognito mode does is it prevents a website that you visit from being put in your browser history. I guess if the Iranian government were to seize your phone and they don't have access to any surveillance technology, that would maybe work possibly. But I mean, if they have any type of surveillance technology, they can simply hook your phone up, crack the encryption, and get right into it and see exactly what you were looking at. So I guess the Iranians don't have that.
but then they hit them with that Tor browser in the next one. And then they hit them with the website for the CIA. It's like, well, where did they get the video if they weren't on the CIA's website? I have many questions here. What about step 5?
Oh, look.
Oh,
It's the
Onion.
onion address for the Tor browser right there.
Oh, look at that. That's interesting. It's kind of funny that the CIA is giving information for people to contact them over Tor. I think Tor is like technically like unlawful in the United States or something, if I'm not
No.
mistaken. Oh, it's not?
No, it's totally legal. You can download Tor. Tor is basically just a way to basically confuse whoever's trying to spy on you. It gets routed. It routes your internet traffic through many different servers, and it's obfuscated where you really can't tell where it came from, and the person on the receiving end of the request can't see the data at all. So it's a little bit more complicated than that. I'm probably doing a pitiful job of explaining it, but it's generally pretty secure. But there's a lot of other things you have to do. Like just simply using Tor is not enough. You have to go through a whole bunch of different stuff to make sure that you're actually secure. But no, it's totally legal.
Oh, for some reason I heard a while ago that it was like unlawful or something. That's
Well,
quite interesting.
the unlawful part is because, of course, the dark web, which is what you can access through Tor, has a bunch of bad things on it, or at least it used to before
Oh,
the FBI got a hold of several of them. But it used to have a lot of bad stuff on there, and there's still some bad stuff there, but it's a lot less bad these days. But it's still there.
interesting. It's very interesting. Moving on from that, we also got to hear that apparently the Iranians are producing ballistic missiles armed with chemical and biological weapons in preparation for a military confrontation with the United States and Israel. That's according to the Israeli military advisor Amir Avivi. I always got to say the Israelis always have a habit of like wanting to go to war with people and then making them sound like the absolute boogeyman. You know, it's like well, if they had these, I mean, technically, there's not really going to be a lot of defense against it. But anyways, moving on from that. We've also been able to hear that apparently the Iranians are trying to buy some anti-ship cruise missiles from the Chinese. What happened to their hypersonic anti-ship missiles that they created that were absolutely impenetrable? Why do they need the Chinese anti-ship missiles now? Methinks the hypersonic anti-ship missiles were a lie. That's what I think.
Maybe so, possibly. You never can tell these days. A lot of lying going on.
You can never tell. Ye can never tell. We also got to see that apparently the Iranians are deploying additional oppression measures, including this technical here that looks like it's been beat up really badly. It's technically a part of the besiege, just in case you all are wondering. We've also been able to see that over in the area of Urmia, the Iranians literally whipped out an entire BMP-1. I've never seen them do this before back in January, but this time they've done it, and they whipped the thing out right in front of the hospital in Urmia, which is a fairly large city within northwestern Iran.
Whipping it out. I guess they're getting ready for either to put down their own people again or possibly to defend their country, but I have a feeling this is for the people.
I have a feeling this is probably for the people. There it is right there, a little up-close picture of it. But it is a full-on BMP-1. Moving on from that, we also have been able to see that there was a large explosion today within southern Tehran. Smoke was rising quite nicely. I wonder what that's about. That was in the Lalazar area. I got that correct the first time. I don't know why I doubted myself, but that was in the Lalazar area. It does appear that generally sabotage by the CIA and the Mossad is still ongoing on the ground. But with that, it is time for us to move on out of this news in the Middle East and on into our news in Mexico, in the Jalisco state, and elsewhere. But before we get on into that, though, we do have one last question to ask you all about the Middle of the East. And a lot of people are wondering, if Israel takes heavy damage from Iran, will they use nukes for defense? And Matthew, what are people thinking about that? What are you thinking about that as well?
Okay, so the question, like the enforcer mentioned, if Israel takes the heavy damage from Iran, meaning taking a bit of a pounding, do you think Israel would use nukes for defense? 56% said no, Israel will defer to U.S. air defenses, and 31% said yes, they are ready to use them, and only 3% said Israel does not have nukes to use. So pretty much everybody knows that Israel has nukes, but it's something that we're not really sure about. We're a little bit confused about whether or not they have nukes, but they have them, they kind of don't have them, they can't confirm, they can't deny, they can't really say for certain. They're a little bit twisted on this. They're getting it a little bit twisted. We're not sure. But I would say, I think Israel would. I'm with the 31%. Somebody is going to be the first one to do it. And when I say a nuke, I mean a tactical weapon. I don't mean like a world-ending nuke. Nothing like that. But there will be one country that will be the first to use it, and it's between Russia, Israel, or China. And we'll have to wait and see which one it's going to be. Israel could be a top candidate to use that weapon first, but we'll have to wait and see. I have a feeling, though, with the amount of air defense we have in the region, it may not come to that, but you never can tell. But Enforcer, what say you?
To tell you that we now have new information that the Iranians have chemical and biological weapons too.
But outside of that, I'd have to say that I would be with the 56%. The Israelis are probably going to defer to U.S. defense because nothing says defending Israel's airspace like billions of tax dollars. So I would have to say I'm with the 56%. I don't think it's ever going to come to that because if anything, hell nor high water, the U.S. Air Force will defend Israel's airspace. Mark my words. So with that in mind, I hope that does address that somewhat well. And we're going to be moving on out of the Middle East and on over and into Mexico, as we have some news coming out of the Jalisco state. We are still seeing that the general cartel war between the Mexican government and the Jalisco New Generation Cartel is still ongoing at this moment, and it does appear that there is a significant amount of damage still being caused throughout the area. We were able to see that the Mexican Army and the National Guard is in the process of removing roadblocks earlier this morning. This is actually the Civil Guard, which is something of a national militia of a sort, but we could see them using one of their armored cars to push one of the burnt roadblocks off of the road and reopen. You see that right here.
Hey, wait a minute. That's an insurgent.
What do you mean?
That's an insurgent from GTA 5 Online right there. You recognize that?
Bro, I was about to be like, insurgent where? I was like looking for like a guy with a gun in the bushes. I was like, what?
Man, it's the insurgent pickup.
You know what? I think it actually is. Honestly, it looks pretty cool, though. Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. That thing's actually really cool looking. But that's the end of that clip, and we also were able to see that additionally, it appeared that the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, which I gotta say, this is actually a pretty wild one. They put out a threat today. This is apparently from the FEM, or Mencho's Special Forces, threatening various businesses with being bombed by FPV drones. So apparently, somewhere out there, the cartel actually has an FPV drone unit. Didn't know that until now. Apparently, this threat is now indicating that they actually have one of those. So apparently, they've been watching the war in Ukraine or some other similar conflict, and they've now adapted their own drone warfare forces into the forces of their cartel. We haven't seen them used yet, at least against the National Guard or the Army of Mexico, or the Civil Guard of Mexico either. But a fairly interesting threat nonetheless, and one that we're going to keep an eye on, because if this ends up becoming true, the cartel actually has drone forces, which, crazily enough, at least in that aspect, that means they're a little bit ahead of the U.S. military, at least in drone force implementation. So that'll be interesting to observe. But moving on out of that, we've also been able to hear some additional statements, or more so video footage from the area, showing a Mexican army convoy on the move. This one was generally entering the area of Guadalajara within its northwestern area, and this is hours ago, so OPSEC isn't being violated. This is a long time ago, but here's the clip.
Oh, they got that thing loaded down.
Dude, the suspension was maxed out on that thing. That thing's got a Carolina squat going on.
That thing is crying, that suspension in the back.
You know, it's interesting to me. You know, the cartel and the army use very similar equipment in some instances, like these technical pickups. Like, they're basically the same in the cartel, pretty much.
Man, honestly, like, no offense to the Mexican government, but between the Mexican government and the cartel, I can't really tell much of a difference. I'm not saying that to try to offend, but, you know, it's a little questionable.
Well, and here's the difference, Matthew. On these trucks, they're painted green, and on the side they have Ejército de México on the side of them, which means the Army of Mexico. The cartel trucks are blacked out, and generally the guys on those trucks are basically wearing usually all black equipment of some sort. That's the easy way to tell. It's basically just a color difference. The Mexican Army is green, and then the cartels generally wear black, and all of their equipment is black as well. Oh, dang, that one's got a 50 BMG. Dang, like, dude, this one's got an M250 up there. Dang.
That is crazy, isn't it?
That is nuts, dude. They could punch through some engine blocks on armored cars with that thing if they hit it right.
Oh, and they have the safety cone in the back, too, because you got to remember safety in the midst of this while you're having your gunfight with a 50 cal on top and also sagging suspension. Don't forget your safety cone. Always got to remember that.
Man, they said the cartel, and then they take the traffic cone and they boop right behind the truck, and then they start firing, and it's like, man.
I can tell you this right now, that is a horrible place to have that cone. That cone, if
It's
that
a
guy
tripping hazard.
Now, if that guy happens to fall off that gunning position right there, that cone is going, it's going somewhere not great. If that guy falls off that gunning position right there, that guy's about to have way worse problems than dealing with cartel.
Man, you know, this guy, man, if the truck like really floors it, he's gonna fall back. She's just gonna hear, "A la verga!" Like, it's gonna be, oh no! Like, it's really no. Oh man, but they passed him by, and then we can see up here, they got a Humvee in tow, being towed behind this transport truck here, filled with more soldiers of the army, and that looks like, Matthew, that looks like a Freightliner transport.
I think that might be a commercial truck that's been converted into a military vehicle, yeah.
Dude, meanwhile, Penske, hey, yo, where the hell's the moving, man? The Mexican army be like, oh, man, I'm not gonna lie, like, the Mexican army, they're working incredibly hard, and I gotta say, the Mexican National Guard and the Mexican Army has been acting heroically over the past few days, but the equipment is kind of like, you know, it's kind of sketch, like, to be entirely honest. let's see what's up here. Oh, some Humvees. So that's basically the rest of it is just pickup Humvees, and that's about it. But it does appear that there are some significant movements of the Mexican army within the area of the Jalisco state, and currently, from what we understand, there's even been a little bit of action up in the Durango state, which we were able to see some Mexican army helicopters operating around the area. This actually appears to be an Mi-17, which the Mexican army does use.
Strange to see a helicopter like that lurking around.
Yeah, I know. You think you'd see something like that over in, like, Ukraine, It's like, but there's also a Black Hawk right here.
Man, you gotta admit, like, it's crazy, like, that when the Mexican government comes in, like, time will tell if they actually retake the region from the cartel or not. We'll have to wait and see on that. But you gotta admit, like, the whole strategy of Black Hawks with miniguns hanging out the door is just crazy, and that seems to be their main strategy when it comes to air strategy of attacking the cartel. Is just the minigun on the door, which is kind of wild. I saw a video yesterday that we unfortunately don't have tonight. It was of one of these Black Hawks swinging by a hotel that the tourists were staying in, and they were unleashing the minigun like right next to the cartel on the ground. They don't hold back with the minigun.
Man, I heard, man, that the Mexican army's motto is "lay 'em low, let that minigun sing." Like, I heard that that's what the motto of the Mexican army is, because I tell you, folks, they go heavy on minigun usage. Like, I'll be honest with y'all, at least in small arms, they go heavy on it all. Like, they have G3s, which are 7.62s. They have the miniguns, which are 7.62s. They have the 50 BMGs. I mean, they don't really, they don't cheap out when it comes to the small arms firepower. They go for heavier calibers. They go for more so lethality over volume of fire, which is an interesting sort of a doctrine in the modern age, because the U.S. and basically every other modern country, we all go for superiority of firepower doctrine, where more bullets down range, even if they're smaller and less lethal, is better than fewer rounds that are more lethal per round. So a little bit interesting with that, but that's basically
they better hope, and I guess they're lucky that the cartel doesn't have actual man-portable air defense. If they had that, the Mexican Air Force or the Mexican Guard would be in some deep trouble, because those helicopters are sitting ducks the way they just fly over cartel positions like that. So apparently the cartel doesn't have those weapons, or I would assume by now they would have probably used them. So we haven't seen that. We've only seen these helicopters getting small arms fire from the ground from the cartel, and that's been about it.
Well, what's interesting is that apparently the cartel doesn't have a whole lot of machine guns either, because you could take a helicopter down like that at that range quite easily with a heavy machine gun even.
Yeah, I guess they don't have an ability to raise it up to the sky, because, a lot of those mounts for the 50 cals don't allow them to go all the way up from what I'm aware of. So they might not be able to get an angle to actually hit it unless they take it off the mountain or are able to hold the thing somehow and maybe aim it up. But, it seems like they really don't have that ability.
Yeah, maybe so. Maybe they don't have, like, air defense mounts for the heavy machine guns. Pretty interesting stuff. But right now, we understand that the cartel is still, well, at least the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, I have to make it clear, it's only that specific one at the moment. They are generally still raining havoc throughout the areas all the way from Veracruz over to the area of Puerto Vallarta. So it does appear that at the moment they are going to still be conducting their significant actions, but it does appear that the Mexican National Guard and the Mexican Army is still trying to take control of the situation and generally stop the reign of terror from the cartel throughout the region. So that's what we're seeing, at least at the moment right now. But moving on from that, now to Mexico, it is time for us to move on and into Europe, because we still have news to cover from the war in Ukraine. Not a whole lot, but it is a little bit. And so with that, also, by the way, folks, I hate to say this, I'm going to have to tell you all this in advance. Sadly, we did not get the speech from Zelensky for today. He did make one, and it was a damn good speech. I listened to the whole thing. But sadly, it has music in it, and that music we don't have a license to play. The office of the president of Ukraine has that license, but that doesn't extend to us, so we would get copyrighted if we played it. So sadly, we can't show his speech for today, but it was an incredibly good one, and I highly encourage you all to go and look at it. But with that, we are going to be moving on into Ukraine. But before we do have a poll on the cartel at the moment. And Matthew, what are people thinking about that? And what are you thinking about that as well?
Okay, so unlike the Mexican government keeps trying to say over and over and over, the situation with the cartel is not under control. It's still out of control. And we're also seeing more threats being issued by the cartel toward the government. We're also seeing as well government sites being attacked as well. So they're still getting revenge. It's not done yet. So what happens next? 38% said the cartel will be put down by the Mexican military, while 27% said the cartel will end attacks soon, and 25% said the cartel will take the region. So the way I see it right now is I believe the cartel is simply trying to get the revenge for the leader being taken out. I'm not really sure if the cartel has an ambition to really take over the Mexican government, if they even have that ability at all, because at this point it seems like they're sort of stretched to their limit right now trying to conduct these attacks. So it seems like they're trying to cause as maximum terror as they can possibly cause, also damage to any type of buildings. The crazy part is it seems like mainly local businesses in the town are the ones getting the pretty much the worst of the damage. It's not really the government; it's more of the civilians in the town taking the hits. So I would say they'll probably end the attacks on their own accord soon. The government's not going to be able to put them down. By the way, that's not going to happen. And also, I doubt the cartel will take over the Mexican government at this point. Originally, it looked like maybe they might be teaming up with other cartels, but it looks like they're acting on their own accord. So it'll probably come to a natural end on its own. But there's not going to be any major changes to the cartel or the Mexican government. But Enforcer, what say you?
I think that the cartels will probably be put down by the Mexican government eventually. I'd be with 38% on that. But generally, I think a lot of people are misinterpreting the actions of the cartel at its opening phase 2 days ago, because I think that what they're trying to do right now, because looking at it and putting myself in the shoes of a cartel leader, if I was the leader of the cartel, the attacks wouldn't be aimed at trying to take over the government, because that would be terrible. Like, that would be a terrible outcome for a criminal outfit. What they would be trying to do is make the government think twice about doing anything to them again, from the amount of damage and general losses that they're able to inflict on the Mexican government. And I think that's what they're trying to do right now, because if you notice, they're trying to cause damage to the economy. They're trying to cause damage to the Mexican government. They're trying to wipe out as many National Guard soldiers and Army soldiers that they can. So what they're trying to do is, one, make the Mexican government concerned about taking any further law enforcement action against them due to the amount of economic damage they're causing. And then for all the guys in the National Guard and the Army, they're trying to strike fear into them that if they join in and actually go along with the orders of the Mexican government against the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, then, they might end up getting killed in the line of service in an ambush in the near future. I think that's what they're generally going for at this point. So I think that this is going to either die down on its own, or the Mexican government, the Mexican army and the government will get control of the situation and then put them down. But I think that's largely the intent of the cartel at this point in central Mexico. So that seems to be the case. So I can tell you all that the Mexican government isn't at threat of collapse anytime soon. Some government officials might be at the threat of death in Mexico. That's definitely the case. But the government isn't going to be collapsing anytime soon. I think that's really what their aim is what I just said a second ago, because it does not look like they're aiming to really overthrow the Mexican government. It doesn't look like any cartel is really joining in at the moment on this either. So with that, I hope that does address it the best I can, at least in my opinion. And moving on from that and on into Europe, we have also been able to see some major developments inside of the war in Ukraine, getting us into the present day, not 4 years ago. It's today now, and it's time for us to get on into this news. And we got some good news, some interesting news. And moving us on into Kazan, we were able to see that the air raid sirens sounded over Tatarstan today. Sad.
Cut the phone lines. Stop the spread of misinformation.
Mamania.
Look, they're trying to cut the phone lines, blood.
Listen, Dyatlov. It's come orders from the top. We gotta get the safety inspection done now. Any quick answers? Well, I could raise the power. Do it. Just go do it. But anyways, moving on from that, we also got to see down in Almatyevsk that the refinery was cooking up nice. Oh, actually, it's an oil depot.
Oh, man. They weren't needing that anyway. It's not like they could have sold it.
No, it's not like they could have sold it or anything. And also, take a look at this, fellas. Take a look at this. The pumping station also got hit too near the town. Wow, that's a fire tornado right there. That seems like a mile tall and, maybe a couple 100 feet wide. Look at that.
Oh, man. Looks like hell.
Man. The gates of hell opening up on the Russians.
You could probably feel this fire from where this guy is filming from. If you open the window, you could probably feel it.
Man, you know, every single animal outside near this fire was cooked to a fine crisp, like over the course of the next few hours.
Could you imagine having a rotisserie next to this? Like those Costco chickens would be crispy.
Man, think of all the well-cooked rats out there on the street right now. I mean, that is something. Like, that is really something right there. Effective pest control, I'll tell you all that. I mean, the rats won't be causing anyone else any trouble. They literally got seared out there on the street. But moving on from that, and on down and into the area of Engels, something wild happened today. I didn't even see a lot of people give this coverage, which is kind of crazy. But here at Engels today, something has exploded. It's at the facility of the airbase, but we don't know what it is. What I'm guessing it is this ammunition storage right here that was not hit. The one next door to it was blown to smithereens a couple of years back and was never rebuilt. But this one's still intact. But let me show y'all the absolute scale of this explosion that happened today, and I'm thinking that it came from there. Look at that.
Damn, where was this from again?
From the Engels Air Base, somewhere in that area.
Damn, that's I'm trying to get an idea of the perspective on this. Is that rooftops that we're seeing below?
Yes, and this is about like a couple of miles away, maybe 3 miles away.
You know, and we don't know what this is. Like, this is kind of a little concerning that we don't know what this is. This is big.
Man, that thing almost looks like a tactical nuke went off. I mean, I'm not gonna lie.
It kind of does.
Like, you know, it's interesting. I mean, apparently, I'm guessing that it's here because it looks like whoever was filming this from like a high rise, like one of these, and they were looking off into this distance over here. Because if you notice, let me see here. Let me measure the distance. I think that's maybe like, yeah, that's about 3 miles or so. And you see that it's mostly field that they're looking at. Like there's some houses here and some trees, which kind of lines up with this area right here. Or they were right here in this building, or they were in a high rise, that's for sure. And then they were looking over a field, basically into nothing, at this mushroom cloud. But I mean, just look at this.
It had to be an air defense depot or air defense storage site for missiles or something. It had to be. That's the only thing that creates comparably sized explosions that we've seen previously would be something like that.
I think Matthew, it was a missile and bomb depot for the strategic bombers at the airbase. That's what I'm thinking, me personally. Okay, he just had a panic attack in the middle of this. It's like, okay, dude, it already blew up. You're good. This is probably Ukraine's biggest hit of the day.
Look, honey, they just blew up the whole airfield. It's over for Russia.
Oh, this is from
that is
earlier.
rather big.
What's that giant orange thing? Like, what's that? The orb of judgment?
Oh man, plot twist. It's actually midnight.
Oh no! Like, oh no! Oh my god, man, that's crazy though. That was an insane explosion. Now, moving us on out of Russia, because that was basically the last hit that we were able to confirm in Russia for the day. One way to kick off the 4-year anniversary, it's now time for us to move on into Kyiv, because we actually have a wildly interesting clip to show. This was apparently provided courtesy of NASA, and filmed specifically by, let's see, Kimia Yui, or Wee, I believe is how that's pronounced, on board the ISS. And this footage was made on the 26th of December of 2025 when the ISS was orbiting over Ukraine. And what's actually crazy, folks, is you could watch the attack on Kyiv from the International Space Station. The in-air interceptions, the missiles impacting the city, you could actually watch that all happening in real time from the ISS. So here it is. There's Kyiv.
That's a crazy sight.
And there's the impacts.
Oh my god.
Here comes the missile. You can actually see one of them right there. There, that little streak, like the little tic-tac looking thing, that's an incoming missile. And there's another impact.
Man, that's awful to see it from this angle too, because it really puts in perspective, like, you know, just the whole Earth in general, like the beauty of the Earth as a whole, and then you just see like idiots firing missiles at each other on the ground. It's like, oh, geez, honestly, this really, really doesn't look good.
So you know something that's really interesting, folks. I'm actually going to show you some crazy stuff here. So this city is Kyiv. This one that's just north of it, that big blob up there, that is actually Minsk. This one is Warsaw, right over about there. That's Warsaw. That's Minsk. This is Kyiv. That up there, we believe, might be Vilnius, maybe. This way over here, like when we get to the start of the clip, that right there is Stockholm. So you can kind of get an idea of where all this is. I mean, but it's really crazy to see in the midst of all that, this right here, because if you look at this, Matthew, notice something interesting here. East of Kyiv, there's no light hardly. And that's because this entire part of Ukraine is in a daily blackout every day.
Where's Chernobyl at in reference to this?
Chernobyl is somewhere like right there. I think that little blip of lights around the Chernobyl power plant, I think.
Interesting. That is fascinating. Isn't it weird to see it from this angle, like just to see, humans killing each other like that from an angle like this? I saw someone say this is why aliens hasn't contacted us yet. I mean, it's certainly not a good look to see this right here. It's like, you have the big, beautiful Earth out here in the middle of the universe, and you have people, finding better ways to kill each other down here on the surface. It's kind of unfortunate.
Yeah, it's crazy. And also watch this at the end of the clip. When Kyiv is almost out of frame, you can actually see a whole bunch of air defense interceptions in the sky over Kyiv. Take a look at this. Here comes a couple. Right, let's see. There. You see a couple of explosions in the sky over the city, and then a couple on the ground, and those were the successful interceptions.
What's also crazy about this is I've always heard that the ISS, this is the ISS, correct?
Yes, this is the ISS.
Yeah. I've always heard that this moves at like 18,000 miles an hour. You don't fully appreciate how fast that is until you realize the vast amount of distance this thing's covering in such a small amount of time. This thing's flying right here. It's going Mach 25.
Yeah, and you know what's even crazier, Matthew? You know what this giant blob of electricity and light is right there?
That is that Moscow?
That is Moscow.
Yeah, I'd assume so.
And I mean, but it's crazy though. Look at this. You can literally see the border between Ukraine and Russia. In Ukraine, there's no light hardly. In Russia, there is electricity in most of the regions because the Ukrainians hadn't, started to obliterate the power grid like they have recently right now.
Yeah, that's crazy.
And also, some of y'all are probably saying, well, why in the world does it look like kind of like low resolution in some areas? It's cloud cover. You can't really see it too well, but the light's actually bleeding through the clouds. And that's why some areas look really crisp, like where the lights look easy to see and they look a lot more high definition. And then some of them look a lot more blurry. It's because of cloud cover.
Huh.
But really crazy.
It's really wild to see how much larger of an area that Moscow takes up compared to Kyiv.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? And all of the cities elsewhere around the area, too. It really does show you where most of the Russian population lives just from the light density alone. I bet you don't see a single starry night in that part of Russia. I would bet you money on that.
Probably so. Also, what's crazy is that little go back to Kyiv a little bit. Go back to where you can see Kyiv and Moscow sort of in the same frame. There's Kyiv right there. That little dot of light is smacking the shit out of that big one over there. Like that's the crazy part. It's like that underdog that everybody keeps crapping on, including the United States officials. That underdog has been whooping the asses of that huge ball of light over there for 4 years in a row, and has actually pushed them back to where they have less territory over 4 years than they started with, which is insane.
It really is nuts. You know what's even crazier? Like it's really cool, folks, to see the Earth at night. You can actually see the major highways in Russia and Ukraine from the lights that are strewn along them from the businesses that run on their links. Like, look at this. You can actually see the motorways in Moscow stretching out, in Russia, stretching out from Moscow and towards the Belarusian border out there.
Yeah, that is kind of neat.
Yeah, you see St. Petersburg up there where my mouse cursor's at, and the major highway that goes up that way.
Oh, yeah, that is kind of interesting right there, linking two BS capitals to each other. That's interesting.
Bliat, I suck, man. Like, man, get the symmetry and hit that DJ Bliat. Like,
they call this the roadway express to Fluffy.
Oh, wait a minute, no, that's Minsk. Minsk is the capital of Belarus. I think you got the mistake. St. Petersburg is just a major city in Russia. It's not a capital.
Fluffy owns all cities.
Fluff. That's right, Fluffy. Someday you will have it all. Like, it's like, get it, boy. Let's see. Where is this? I think this little range right here, I think this is the Carpathians, which would give you an idea that this fire right here is actually around Lviv, that one that you can see right there.
Interesting.
But I honestly, I could watch this for a while here. This was just wildly interesting footage.
I would just love to have access to the satellite network. Obviously, we can't because we don't have a clearance for that. But it would be so nice to have like access to those military satellites. Could you imagine like what they're able to see? Like with the vast network of satellites they have, they can probably make passes over most of the world within like a short period of time. They can probably see exactly what's happening anywhere down to like the inch. It would be incredible to see that.
It would be incredible to see that. You know what's even crazier, folks? I didn't even notice this until now. You can actually see the Aurora Borealis up there at the top of the screen.
Yeah, you can kind of see it. That is interesting.
Yeah, that's really cool. Kind of give me, and look, you can see the curvature of the Earth. Look at that. You can actually see that from here.
That is interesting. Also, by the way, we were running super late. I just looked up at the time.
Oh, dang it. Like, I just looked at that too, and I was like, bro, I just winced. Okay, moving on from that, we got to get through the rest of this news here, a little lickety-split, like, you know. We were also able to see the Russian casualty report, and the Russians lost a Bobcat. Hey!
Oh!
Hey! And this needs to keep the record stated. Russian losses to February 24th of 2026, day 1,462, 1,693 drones shot down is the fourth highest daily loss, averaging about 1,357 a day over the past week. Troop loss averages down to low 900s, artillery and vehicles are above 7-day averages. And over the past 24 hours, we have been able to confirm that the Russians have lost 920 soldiers wounded and killed, 2 tanks, 4 APCs, 50 artillery pieces, 1 air defense system, 1,693 drones, 190 supply trucks, and 1 Bobcat skid steer. All in all, a pretty good day, and great to see. Moving us on from that and on into our next clips, which are a little bit seldom in number along the front, we were able to see some Russian forces getting hit by the 28th Brigade. Let's take a look. Oh, look at that little Russian vehicle moving down that road. Oh, it's a tank! How rare, and it's a T-80 BVM. Wow, that is wildly rare. Speaking of T-80s.
They have the gutter armor on this one right here. It's like the gauge to like a gutter or something.
Bleed. Ivan, put on the gutter. Like, it's like, okay.
Here, Ivan, try some of this gutter soup. It's a brand new thing. They call it meal ready to not eat.
Have you had some of these sewer soup? Like, it's like, oh, I'll have some sewer soup.
Drink up, Ivan. Put some vodka in it to season it.
It is what we call a fecal broth, bleed. Like, it's like, oh. Like, it tastes just like home. Really? Yes. Shit. Like, yeah. Like, it's just like smolts, bleed.
Ivan, can we get a little bit of a fresh sewer soup? Can we have this mid-fresh? Is it stale?
Ivan, this piss broth that I'm having with my sewer soup is stale. Give me fresh one immediately. Yes, sir, commandeer. Like, I will go and piss in cup for you. Fresh and delicious. Just like pig
Someone
nipples.
said, stop mucking. I don't know what you're talking about. you gotta go. He's gotta go.
Listen, Jack, you gotta go. You gotta get the hell out of here, Jack.
Man, he's gotta leave the social club. He's gotta go.
Oh, man. Girls for the win. Oh, man. I tell you. But anyways, with that, it's time for us to move on further down the line and towards the area of Donetsk. We also were able to see a 412th Nemesis Brigade hitting a Buke. Calling this thing rebuking. You know, for the Russian Orthodox Church to exist in Russia, they sure have a lot of bukes. I don't hear of the Russian Orthodox Church rebuking them. But the Ukrainians sure as hell are. Take a look at this. Oh, there it is. At the bada boom. Destroyed. Oh! Thing got blown into pieces of Legos. Moving on from that clip, it's time for us to move on to the next one. Down near Zaporizhia, we were able to see Russians getting hit pretty badly by the birds of Magyar. I believe this is. Yes, it is birds of Magyar. We don't get the antenna stuff anymore where he smacks the antenna on the screen. But it's still birds of Magyar. Oh, is that an Erdogan? Oh, it is. Look at that. I think these guys miscalculated their aim. They were cross-firing. Like, I don't think that's...
I think they might have messed up a little bit with that.
Bro!
Oh, bro. That was almost a disaster.
Take a look at them. About to get obliterated in their shitty Erdogan. Look at that thing. Zelensky said, F Belgrade and screw this Oregon as well. Oh, Bliet!
No. From the back.
blow its back out. Like, like
He did just that. Look at him. He's hurting.
destroy. Beautiful.
Are you gonna send in another? Oh.
Oh, another
Oh.
one. This is a Gjonson Panzer S1. Sorry, I misread that.
Oh, an expensive fellow. Look at this thing. This thing coming in a little wobbly, though. It's going to get it. Oh, look at the stock footage we're getting here.
It's time to blow up a nice 15 milli. Oh, there it is. It's looking right at the drone. The operator's like, "Who, me?" And the drone's like, "Yes, you." Like,
Oh, it came in wobbly, but it was on target, though.
yeah, bro. Imagine being the operator in that stupid cab with the camera literally watching the drone fly up at point blank range. All you do is just sit there and look at it.
Man, can you imagine if you thought that little missile was coming in wobbly? Can you imagine the operator's legs was jello at that point? That guy was shivering and shaking. He was literally shivering his timbers.
Man, that guy hopped out of that cab and went plug walk. Like, man, it was shivering and shit. But anyways, he was doing this the stanky leg or whatever it's called. You know what I mean? Man,
Stanky leg.
Man, I don't know what it's called. I'm just trying to figure it out, man. But we got that.
Somebody has a problem.
Man, he's got that gout. Like, man, he's got that gout.
Go see a doc.
Oh, look, a radar.
Look at this old janky thing. This old janky radar.
You know, these are actually the expensive ones. Those cost like 50 million.
50 mil for a couple of barbed wire bits.
And also, the Ukrainians did conduct some airstrikes on a major bridge near Vasilivka earlier today. They were playing the absolute Chad music while they did it, too. And look at them go. The damage was immense.
Oh, wow, the damage was so bad, we had a little bit of a glitch.
Oh, a glitch, you say? What happened? What happened? Oh, that bridge is gone. Boy. Well, on that note, folks, at the news segment that was 2 hours and 40 minutes long, we finally reached the end of this news for the day. Sadly, we do not have the speech from President Zelensky of Ukraine. The music is copyrighted, so sadly, we won't be able to get that. But we will be able to start taking questions. And we are going to get to them immediately tonight, folks. But we do thank you all so much for watching so far. Over the course of about 2 hours and 40 minutes, 100,000 people have watched this stream. And I gotta say, it's kind of crazy, folks, because if you look at it, you can literally see when the State of the Union ended, because like 5,000 extra people joined us right after that ended. Pretty wild, honestly, to see that. And we're always honored and greatly appreciative to have had all of y'all here. And we're going to be making sure to get into those questions right now. So, Matthew, what do we got?
All right, so jumping away from our news and right into our super chats, we're going to waste no time getting right into them. This one goes to Yenya Tolls, who puts in a $50 support. And thank you very much, Yenya, for throwing in that support right there. And I must say, that was very good timing with changing the name from the other one to Yenya Tolls with the whole little squiggle above the E, which I'm not sure really what that's called. An accent mark or something like that? Enforcer, what is that called? It's called what?
A tilde.
It's called a little tilde. They put a little tilde above the E to let you know it's Yenya. Thank you very much, Yenya, for that $50 support. Did not leave a comment, though, or at least we can't read the comment. They said it's fine to pass on it. I was going to have to pass on it because it was a little bit out there, but we appreciate that. And Enforcer, what say you?
Thank you so much for the support, Yenya Tolls. And I got to say that, well, I think we'll have to pass on that one. I just saw it myself. Sadly, I think we'll have to pass on that one. But I do thank you greatly for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And I don't know if y'all have seen this lately, folks. Speaking of like weird stuff, Matthew, have you seen that police body cam that came out of that frat where all those weirdos were down in the basement shirtless?
Oh yeah,
like dude,
yeah, I saw that.
Bro, like that guy was like, okay, y'all gotta understand where I'm coming from. This is absolutely freaky shit. Like, I was like, man, this cop is
if
real.
only you knew what they were doing down there. Jeez, you'd be a lot more concerned if you knew what they were actually doing.
I gotta be honest with y'all, folks. I don't care if this is unpopular take or not. Frats are, in my opinion, and sororities are kind of like for people who are like socially inept, because I don't really know why in the hell you have to be like hazed and beaten up and have things shoved inside of you like hummus up your rectum to get some friends, you know what I mean? Like, I feel like you gotta be able to just get friends normally instead of having to get in a frat and then spend all that money and then be around a whole bunch of douches. Like, you know, like that's what I don't really understand about the whole frat and sorority thing. I never was a big fan of, like, I never was in one. Neither was Matthew when we were in college. I never even got them, and I didn't want to be in one. It's just weird. And then
It's kind of like being, it's like a weird thing when you get a bunch of like it's an unfortunate thing when you get a bunch of dudes together. There's always like a hierarchy that like sort of like fits into place. Like you have the Chad type dudes that want to be at the top. They're usually like the jock type. Then you have like down at the bottom. And I'm not trying to say this to insult anybody, by the way. You have like the people that are more like I guess you could say intellectual or kind of they call them nerds basically, sort of like near the bottom rung of this like structure. And it always turns into the ones at the top take the ones at the bottom and start doing horrible things like every single time. It's almost like a gang actually, because to join a gang, and the only way I know this is because we grew up around them, is you have to do a thing called getting jumped in, which means you want to join the gang. They basically bring the gang in and they beat the hell out of the recruit that's trying to join the gang. If you can endure the beating, then you can join the gang, generally speaking. So it's the same thing with the whole like cult thing with the fraternities and stuff like that. Their version of jumping in is hazing, and usually it involves really disgusting things that take place in the basement of these places, of these houses. I think they call them, the sorority, fraternity houses, whatever they call them. And they do. It's really awful, really, to be honest. I never had a desire to ever be a part of that, like ever at all. I'm like, well, I don't understand why people want to go have a part of that. It seems a little bit strange.
Yeah, it seems strange, and I mean, like the people who are getting involved in it, like I just got to be honest, I really don't look highly on them because it's like, are you that easily manipulated that a whole bunch of dudes can like take you down in the basement and you're gonna let them like cover you in piss and stuff and God knows what else and then beat you just to get some like supposed friends? Is like, do supposed friends like piss on you and beat you often? Because I mean, generally mine never did. So I was like, I generally avoid that at least. If that's a friend that you get, it's like, I'm good. I think I'm fine on that. But I'd have to say the whole frat sorority thing, it's weird as hell to me. I don't understand it at all. And honestly, like people who are like, and then also another thing is that when we got to law school, literally everybody in law school except for us had been in a frat or a sorority. And then you listen to their stories about like the hazing and stuff. And like one story that I heard was like one guy got put in like an ice bathtub to the point that his big toe got frostbite and they had to amputate it. And then they were all like, "That's so cool." And I'm like, no, that's like really messed up. I mean, this guy like lost his big toe. I mean, like a big toe is important for like stability when you're standing and stuff. It's like that's not cool at all. That's just whack and messed up. That's sadistic.
Oh yeah, I'm sitting there listening to that. I'm like, they're like, "Oh, that's so cool, bro." And I'm like, hey, these people are like room temperature stupid. I'm like, yeah, these people are kind of stupid.
And then
Actually, it's like that's not really cool. The crazy part is though, like you say you look down on them, but what's strange is a lot of our presidents have been a part of those organizations, and it's a very secretive versions of fraternities, and actually a lot of people that have held really high positions in the State Department and things like that, they've been a part of secret versions of those fraternities, which some people make conspiracy theories about, but they also do very strange stuff as well. It's weird when people want to feel exclusive, the weird stuff that they start doing to feel that way. It's like and that's why I think that's part of the reason why they keep it secret. They don't want anybody to find out what they're doing to each other because if people found out, they might be like, hey, like these are the people that we want in charge of stuff. These people that are kind of a little bit weird, a little bit to say the least. It's like we probably don't want people like that in charge of anything if they're willing to do this type of stuff.
yeah, and then and then you would hear like the stories from like the sororities, and they'd be like, oh yeah, you had to like reach a certain body count or do this or I'm like, this is all just wildly messed up. It's like I don't like. Do y'all understand how messed up the stuff y'all are involved in is? Like, just to get in a friend group, you have to do all of this wacky, messed up stuff. Like like if you ever said that in like a normal scenario, like to like a woman, like okay, to be in our company, like to work at our company, you have to like sleep with this many people. Or if you did that to a dude, where you're like, okay, to work at our company, we have to take you down into the company basement and beat the shit out of you and piss on you. It's like a lot of people be like, this is wildly messed up. Like, like a lot of people be like, I'm not taking this job. I'm good. But for some reason, in every other social situation, none of that is acceptable, which it shouldn't be. But with frats and sororities, it's actually apparently encouraged and a part of the culture, which I find really weird and messed up. But anyways, that's just my 2 cents on sororities and frats. I'm not really a big fan of them. And I'm not really a big fan of the type of people who have the personality to be a part of them either, because I find them to be just not to, be upfront, but I find them to be quite airheaded and generally unintelligent, just to be completely frank. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that well, and it's time for us to move on into the next one.
You know, the unfortunate part is the ones that are participating in stuff like that are the first ones that are going to get hired in these top end jobs and stuff like that. Because what that
Phi
tells the
Kappa
people is,
Delta. You know,
what they tell the people is this person will do literally anything to be a part of this group, literally anything. So they're a great pick because if you tell them something, if they're willing to go through this in the basement, they'll definitely do this for you. So hire them. That's what they think. That's the logic that these people are sort of having behind that. If they're willing to do this, then they'll do X, Y, and Z. That's what they're probably thinking. But moving into our next super chat here, this one is going to go to none other than Chris Feilbach, who puts in a 50. And thank you very much, Chris, for that very generous support. He said, I just switched over from the Sotu. The Union is currently in a state, nothing terribly new in the speech.
thank you so much for the support. And I didn't watch the State of the Union, because I was working on the show, but I've heard some mixed results from folks. I heard that a lot of people were like, well, it's certainly a state of the union, and then some people are like, well, the union is certainly in a state, that's generally what it is. Was there any mention, Matthew, about the Great Salt Lake in the State of the Union?
No, I don't think he mentioned that.
Also, I kind of find it funny, man. Like, I gotta say, folks, one thing I gotta say, it's great to hear that there's apparently going to be some assistance given to the Great Salt Lake by the federal government and the state government of Utah. But also, it's kind of it's so ridiculous. Like, he refuses to call it the Great Salt Lake, which is his official name. He says, we're going to make the Salt Lake great. We're going to make the Salt Lake Great Salt Lake. It's like, it's already the Great Salt Lake. It's like, that's the literal name of the thing.
He named it that.
Oh yeah, I forgot. He named it that. Like,
Yeah, he named it that. Remember?
The country wouldn't exist without a great leader.
Before him, it was the Salt Lake, and now because he's here, it's called the Great Salt Lake.
And actually, Matthew, I heard if I remember this correctly, it was actually just a lake, but then he came along and he made it great, and then he added a whole bunch of liberal tiers into it, and it turned it into the Great Salt Lake, if I remember the story right.
No, you're not remembering it right. Before he came along, it was called the Great Salt Pond. But because he came along, they named it the Great Salt Lake. It graduated to the lake. If he stays president long enough, it'll turn into the Great Salt Ocean if you're not careful.
Oh man, like it's gonna be the Bonneville Lake again, bro. We're gonna get the whole thing back. Oh my lord, man, I'm not gonna lie. I hope that the Salt Lake has helped out a whole lot, because it needs it. But at the same time, it's like, why the hell can we not just call it what it is? It's the Great Salt Lake. Like, or like the Salt Lake, but it's the Great Salt Lake. So it's not like he's adding great to it. It's already been a Great Salt Lake. It's the Great Salt Lake. It's literally like the only one of its kind in the whole world, basically. So it's like, I don't know what, but anyways, beyond that though, like, it's great to hear.
I think until they fix it, they ought to call it the Pitiful Salt Lake until they fix it.
The Sad Salt Lake, bro. Like, that's what they ought to call it.
the pitiful dying Salt Lake or something like that. They ought to, like, really though, like they ought to fix the lake. I mean, it's a beautiful sight. I mean, it looks like you're next to like the sea
ocean
or something when you drive by it. Like, you can't tell the difference between looking at the Great Salt Lake or looking at the legitimate ocean. Like, you can't tell the difference. It's a beautiful sight. So I hope they actually do fix it. It would be nice.
Yeah, it would be great. It would be nice to see. If they don't fix it, the state is about to be going downhill quick. Like, it's not going to be good. People are going to be moving out in droves. Like, if they were talking about the migration from California, that's just domestic policies. Wait until literal clouds of arsenic are being blown up from the bottom of the dry lake bed and then flung into the city on a near daily basis. Wait until then, you're going to see a real exodus, because that would be absolutely disastrous for most people's health, and a lot of people are not going to live in an arsenic cloud. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that well, at least the best I can. But, State of the Union is what it is, I suppose. I didn't pay attention to it much. I've heard some interesting stuff about it. But a huge thanks to you so much once again, and we are on to the next one.
Also, by the way, for the people asking, the racing spot is the Salt Flats. It's way down to the west on the interstate. If you go away from the Salt Lake, it's pretty far down. It's basically next to the Nevada border. I've been down there once so far, and it is true. It is completely flat, completely salty. It's an unbelievable environment. Like, it's hard to believe when you're standing in it that it's actually real. It feels fake. It feels like you're standing in something that's like AI generated or something. It doesn't even feel real. But yeah, it's like totally flat. They set land speed records and stuff down there. It's really cool, by the way. But I want them to refuel the Salt Lake though, because I don't want a new racing strip. I want the lake to stay, with water in it. That'd be pretty nice. But anyway, so jumping into our next one, this one goes to Chris Feilbach. Once again, he puts in another 50, and thank you very much, Chris, for that generous support. The second one of the night, and he said, "LSA, Lake's salty again."
Hey, and I like to see another salty lake. It's a good thing to have salt lakes. There's a lot of salt in them. And I gotta thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep it running. I saw someone say, why arsenic? Well, somehow, some way, I don't know the science behind it or the exact geology behind it, but the entirety of the lake bed is basically covered in a film of arsenic. So the more the lake dries up, the more of that arsenic gets exposed to the air, and when the lake bed dries out, it actually becomes fairly powdery, like the soil of it. So then that gets blown away. It basically becomes an aerosol or airborne instantly, and then it spreads around. And that's why, with more and more of the lake bed of the Great Salt Lake being exposed, more and more of that arsenic is going to start getting exposed to the open air and get blown around. So, that's a very concerning thing, especially for public health, because arsenic is a poison. Like, arsenic is used heavily back in the day as just straight up poison to kill rats, people, and everything. So having a whole load of that in the air and just, flying around all over the place, it's not going to be good for the public health. And people are going to start moving out because no one wants to live in a cloud of literal poison. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion, or at least from what I know, more so on the Salt Lake. And with that, we are on to the next one. But a huge thanks to you once again, Chris, for that incredible support.
Yes, indeed. And our next one here goes to none other than Duncan VR. And thank you very much, Duncan, for that $26 support. And we appreciate that very, very much. And Duncan said, "Moo woof quack, inshallah. Did someone say pizza? You better get one then. And what say the marmot, Baba?"
The marmot this time of night? Heavens, we'll have to get him. Let me go get the marmot. This was completely unexpected, but a surprise to be sure, and a welcome. Oh, hello there.
Oh, hello there, Governor. It's a real good night here in the pizza joints. It's a good time to go down here and see the Secretary of War trying to order pizzas to try to mess up the indicator. He didn't realize it was about the location data from the phones. It wasn't about the orders. So he's done the wasting all that money. He going to spending it like it's out of style, like it's taxpayer money. It's a real shame what they're doing with that money. But what say the fly?
Oh, man. Oh, wait a minute. What? Get out of the way. It's me from the Department of War, and I'm here to tell you that I'm buying pizzas because that's real warrior spirit stuff. Do a pull-up. Okay, well, forget on that one. But I'm from the Secretary of War. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and follow for more. And we're...
I got a real question, Governor. Real question. Are you ready for the question, Governor?
Yeah, I got a... What do you got? What do you got?
What kind of hair pomade are you using, Governor? Your hair doesn't move a millimeter when you're jumping around.
I use that Secretary of War hair gel. It makes sure that my hair is ready for war. It's standing straight up at attention, ready to get him.
That hair doesn't move a single centimeter while he's jumping around and acting all hyped. He's acting like he's on caffeine. He's jumping around. That hair doesn't move an inch. I was wondering if it was made of wax.
I've seen a clip of the guy where he was boozing, right, in the kiddie pool. Do you remember this clip, Matthew? And he came out of the kiddie pool with a beer in hand, and literally there's water pouring off of his hair and anything, and his hair still wasn't moving. It's like, is that fake? Is that like Lego hair?
I'm dead serious. Putting all the politics aside, if I could ask one question, it would be, how the hell does your hair stay like that? Pull up a picture of that guy real quick. Just pull up a picture and show people the hair. I'm no lie, that dude's hair is so consistent. I don't understand how it stays that consistent unless it's possibly fake. I'm not sure though. I mean, it appears to be real. I mean, get a side view of this hair. Let's see a side one, outside, in the lighting.
Oh, look, there he is coming out of the water, and his hair's still the same. It's like, how? It's like, dude, you literally see it's wet. It's still got the same shape and form as that.
Yeah, look at that one out. Let's see the one outside, the one that's outside down the third row down there.
This one?
To the left? Yeah, that one. Look at that.
I mean, it really is kind of like an enigma. It's like the hair doesn't grow and it also doesn't change shape. I feel like, man, he goes home, he clicks the thing off like Lego hair and he puts it on every morning because it literally does not move.
But you can see though, it's you can tell it's not fake. It's clearly on his head, in his head, the hair is. I don't understand how hair stays like that. I mean, if somebody's saying possibly a half can of hairspray. I don't use hairspray, so I don't know how that works. But this guy's hair is so perfectly in place. It seems like nothing could mess it up. The wind doesn't mess it up. Him doing anything, jumping around doesn't move it. Nothing moves it. It's completely in place.
Now here's my question. is it grease that they use to grease the treads of the tanks? Because I mean that stuff would be strong enough, you know. That stuff is generally of a good constitution. It would generally hold its form.
Yeah, honestly, like I'm kind of like not really wanting to replicate this, but at the same time, though, I am curious about what is being done here to cause this, just out of curiosity.
It's a scientific enigma. I mean, look at it. It's literally the same in every damn picture. It wasn't
Yes,
the
the
same.
complete opposite of his boss's hair.
Let's see. This was him at Princeton? Oh, Princeton. Isn't that one of those universities that was just listed that you can't join the military anymore if you're from that university? Isn't that one of them?
No, you can still join the military. It's just that the military is not going to fund your education there.
Oh. Isn't it one of them, though? Isn't Princeton one of those universities?
Nah, I can't recall for certain. I'd have to look at the list.
Go look at the list really quickly. I want to find that out. Because that'd be kind of a little ironic if this guy went to Princeton and then they won't fund your education at Princeton any longer, although he went there.
Let's see here. So apparently, what was the name of the university again?
Princeton.
So if the email is accurate, apparently it's on the list, at least from what I'm seeing here. But that's just a glance.
Damn, the irony. He can come from Princeton, but according to the email, no one else can go. I mean, talk about, like, if that is true, talk about pulling the ladder up and beating everyone with it. I mean, that's crazy. It's kind of funny, though. They said all of the Ivy League universities you can't go to. It's like, it's like, that's a little funny. It's like, if I remember correctly, it's like, the vice president went to one after the army, well, actually after the Marines. This guy went to one after the army. It's like, how come everyone else can go to them, but now no one can? It's like everyone else got their education funded.
My question is, because usually I'd have connections to get in these universities, like those really high-end Ivy League ones. Like you usually just can't get in, like just being like a nobody. Like no offense, I didn't go there, by the way. So if that makes anybody feel any better, I went to a totally normal state-funded university, like most of us do. But for the Ivy League ones, it's like, do we really believe that they just got in because they were just good on the merits? It's like, is it possible that maybe they knew somebody that maybe gave them a good recommendation that maybe helped out? It's like, from what I've heard, at least, I'm not sure if this is 100% true all the time, but I've heard that you generally have to know somebody to get in those places like that. And it seems like a lot of people that go there always act like they got in on their own accord. Like, oh, I just got in because I was so good they couldn't help but let me in. It's like, yeah, that's not the way I've heard it works. I'm not sure if that's the way it actually works, but that's not the way I've heard.
Oh. Well, according to Wikipedia, his mom was an executive business coach who was taught on the Minnesota Excellence in Public Service series and was a fellowship and leadership program for a certain political party. So there you go. There's your answer, probably.
Interesting. I was naive enough at one point to think, oh, I want to go to, I think it was Stanford. I think it was the one I wanted to go to. I wanted to go to Stanford out there in Silicon Valley because I was really fascinated by the area because I've always wanted to go see that area because it's pretty cool to me. But then after I grew older, I was like, okay. I'm like, even if I would have done top notch, unless I really knew somebody, it would have been very hard to get in. Like there was a possibility I could have gotten in, but the odds were probably against it for the most part. You don't really fully realize that stuff, or at least I didn't, until I got a little bit older. And I was like, oh, okay, well, that was kind of a pipe dream the entire time.
Yeah, you kind of find that out. We both, by the way, folks, went to a university in Alabama called UAB. That's where we went to university. Both of us did. So we're not from that Ivy ilk. Those Ivy League kids that all get to go around and be in the little group. We're not in that group. But it is always interesting to me. It's always interesting because it's like the vice president. I'm not trying to get on a political thing here, but I'm saying this just up front. The vice president writes a book called Hillbilly Elegy, but then I think he went to like Harvard or something. It's like, okay, so you're a hillbilly that went to Harvard. What kind of hillbilly are you? It's like I've never heard of a hillbilly going to Harvard.
I think it was Yale, by the way. He went to Ohio State University, then he went to Yale Law School, which is very hard to get in, by the way. Let me quote you the acceptance rate. The acceptance rate is 5.2%. So it's extremely selective. Yale, I believe, is one of the top. I think it might be number 1, 2, or 3 in top law schools in the country. So it's extremely hard to get in. There's only 200 students that get in every year. Just for a reference, by the way. At least that's what it says on the Google overview. Well, so I mean, it's pretty tough.
Well, here's my question. So he goes to Yale Law School, right? He goes to Ohio State University and then Yale Law School. And by the way, this is how the Marines. He did a couple of years. He did a 4-year tenure in the Marines, which is the minimum contract that you could sign in the modern day. and then he went to Ohio State University, and then he went to Yale Law School, and then he only did a brief career in corporate law, and then immediately went to working for Peter Thiel in Mithril Capital. Now, that doesn't really speak hillbilly to me, you know? Like, just me personally, because any hillbilly I know, they don't really, end up going to a law school in Yale and then go to Mithril Capital. That's a fairly rare sort of a track for a hillbilly, Like, that's kind of like that whole thing of, like, next thing you know, Jeb's a millionaire and you're living in the Beverly Hills as a hillbilly sort of thing. It's like, that's like a work of fiction. It's like, you can't be a hillbilly and then do all of those things, because all the hillbillies I know, they generally kind of grow up around where they're from. They stay around where they're from, and if they go into the service, they come back and then they live right where they're from. I don't really know of any hillbillies that go working for Mithril Capital or go to Yale.
Now that you mentioned, I just remembered that my life story getting here was a really interesting one, by the way. I was actually raised by wolves when I was young, completely. I was just raised by wolves. Nobody even knew where I was. Like, I was just out in the woods. Like, that's all they knew. Is like the wolves would come around occasionally. They'd bring like a slice of meat, mayonnaise and bread, and I'd make a sandwich and eat. It was a tough life. And then somehow I got accepted into university and graduated with honors. And somehow I'm here. It's really an unusual situation.
I also find it funny. I gotta make sure to throw a couple over the other side of the fence here, because we're tossing a lot of snowballs at one group, but I gotta toss a few at another. Isn't it kind of weird how the governor of California says that he's like everyone else? He's just like the common man, but he also went to an Ivy League university as well, and I think he like had a vineyard like when he was out of college or something. It's like, don't you kind of find that a little weird? It's like everyone who always says they're just like everyone else. I mean, they own a vineyard or they went to an Ivy League university. I mean, how many people do y'all know that went to an Ivy League university or owns a vineyard or something like that? I don't know any of them. So who the hell are these?
I don't know anybody owns a vineyard.
Yeah, I mean, who the hell are these salt of the earth people? I haven't found any salt of the earth people like this. Like, it's like I find this all quite peculiar. And what's up with these socialists that own several summer homes?
The most down to earth people I know are from Harvard.
Truly, I mean, when they get in the bottom of that fraternity basement and they get beat with a baseball bat, so I mean, they really do seem down to earth, like really salt of the earth kind of folks. When they go working for like BlackRock or some, really speaks the common man, the average day Joe, those real jobs, like a consultancy firm.
Also, by the way, we're just joking to make that clear. We're just joking.
Of course we are. We're just kidding around here, but it is rather interesting, wouldn't y'all say? Like let's think of one, Matthew. Let's think of one. How many of them went to an Ivy League university? I'm gonna pull up another one.
How many of who? Like the people in charge?
Yeah, I wonder.
Everybody.
Let's see here. Oh well, it can't be everybody, right? It can't. Let's see here. Oh, let's see here. Oh, huh. Well, looks like Mitch didn't.
He's from old school.
Yeah, he's old school. That was back in the day when you didn't have to be an Ivy League guy and smile perfectly and go, "Look, Martha."
Back in the day, before he was a senator, he used to star in the Toad and Frog books, and they sort of morphed into it later.
Mr. Senator, what's going on around here? Let's see.
We're gonna make a special episode called "Toad Goes to Congress."
Let's see. I want to check this one out here really quickly for someone from California. I'm interested here. Moved to New York City. Huh. Hold up. Do they not have like an esteemed education either? Matthew, is the Trinity College high end?
I don't think so.
Huh. That's interesting. So that's another one right there that didn't. That's interesting. All the people from the modern day, all the people who are getting elected recently are kind of showing up in the political scene here just recently. All of them are Ivy League, but all of the ones that are from like, the ones that are basically fossils that are like in the Congress, a lot of them basically came from like community colleges. That's really interesting.
That's because they used to get elected because of not the internet being around. They used to just get there because they were kind of like, somewhat actually popular instead of manufactured.
I mean, it's a little bit interesting, folks, because I'm looking at one right here, this one, and they're from a fairly, like, run-of-the-mill kind of like a college, and I'm like, huh, that's interesting, it's like, it's really interesting, kind of showing how the trends are changing these days. Let me go look at another one. Let me go pull up another one.
Also, by the way, we have to keep moving because we're going to be, like, incredibly over time.
Let me get this last one here. I just want to see. Let's see. What's the education here? Education. Boston University, is that a high-end one?
Semi, I think.
Let me see here. Oh, it's kind of like the version of Alabama. Okay, well, it's not that high-end. So, that's interesting. But anyways, folks, enough of that. It's time for us to move on to some more questions because we are running long in the tooth and also short in time. So with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Waba, who puts in a 20. And thank you very much, Waba, as well, for that support. They said anti-Sotu donation.
Hey, and thank you so much for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And we also have a 20 from Hugh. And thank you very much, Hugh, for that second support of the night. And he said, here's another one for Enforcer Matt and the LSA. And thank you for remembering the Enforcer Matt. I think we do appreciate that, by the way, Hugh. And Enforcer, what say you?
I gotta thank you so much for the support. And thank you for enjoying this channel and helping us to keep this thing running. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to keep this channel running and make this thing possible. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to none other than Hokey Redneck, who put in a 20. And thank you very much, Hokey, as well. He said, Matt and Andrew, do you think Hill Air Force Base is on the list? Oh, and it's definitely on the list, by the way. It is certainly on the list. The Chinese, Russians, and everybody would love to get their paws, hands, or whatever you want to call it, on this airbase right here. If there was ever a war, they would certainly try to target that in the event of a war. But Enforcer, what say you?
Yes, it is on the list. It actually is confirmed to be on the list. And my big question is, folks, if Hill Air Force Base gets nuked, does the Frontrunner still run a normal 6-day service, or is it going to be running on a reduced schedule in the meantime? That's really my question. But anyways, I hope that is addressed the best I can. And a big thanks to you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Tom Xman, who puts in a 20. And thank you very much, Tom, as well. They said, what month and date was the LSA named? And happy 4th year. And this is the greatest news channel.
LSA Day, or LSA Week, really, is coming up here in the latter part of this upcoming March. That's when it's going to be. So, I hope that answers your question well. I always forget LSA Day. I know the week, but I forget the exact day. I'll have to try and look back at the Keeper of the Records, Miss Deese's records, to see when LSA Day is. Because once LSA Day is here, the next 7 days after that are a part of LSA Week. So a big thanks to you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we're on to the next one.
Also, by the way, moving on to our next one here. Also, I see real quick, I'm gonna make this fast because we got a lot of questions to get to. But someone mentioned how fast time's moving. Someone said, my dad told me about the 1900s and stuff like that. And some other people were saying, dang, time moves fast, blah, 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 blah. You know, the fascinating part is, ever since the Wuhan Whirlybird came around, do you know how much time has elapsed since then?
6 years.
7 years, actually. It's been 7 years. Yeah, it's been 7 years since that happened. It feels like it's only been like 3 or 4 or something, which is really, really odd. I'm not sure how that works like that, but at times since that happened, it seems to have flown. Like those 7 years seem to have just vanished for the most part. It's really odd. But moving into our next one here, this one goes to Greg Carrier, who puts in a 20. He said, thank you for the common sense back in the USA.
And thank you so much for the support, because you're helping us to keep this kind of common sense on air and around. And so huge thanks to you once again. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Arar983, who puts in a 20. And thank you very much, Arar, as well. He said, good evening from the Vegas Strip. Where the table games are all too expensive to pay. I bought a gelato and a waffle cone and dipped back to the room to listen to the Enforcer stream, LOL, and LSA.
And thank you so much for the support. And I gotta say, Vegas, I've heard, is very expensive these days to do anything in, really. I was actually seeing a documentary that just came out on YouTube about it, and I was going to watch it, but then I had to work on the show. But I gotta say, you're picking the right thing to do in Vegas, watching the Enforcer show. And so I got to thank you massively for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And I got to say, I don't really know what Vegas looks like. Let's drop down and take a look really quickly. It's going to be like 1 second because we are low on time.
Oh!
Looks like LA.
Kind of looks bad.
US Lanterra AC.
I love my tires be stacked up outside of a big yellow building.
Boy, I love my inflatable arm-filling tube man. Really cool. Smog Busters. They speak Spanish.
You're gonna bust up that smog.
Man, we gonna bust up on them, man. Like, we gonna beat their ass. But anyways, with that, we're on to the next one.
And our next one here goes to Senzor, who puts in a 14. Thank you very much as well for that support, Senzor. They said, hello, Enforcers. To touch on my chat from Saturday, I did some research, and it's improper to call the Russia-Ukraine war the Ukraine war. As a Ukrainian, I would appreciate it if you could call it properly LSA.
And thank you for the support. But generally, we never get too particular with the wordage around here because if we did that, we would be too caught up on trying to get things correct instead of just getting the point across. Because if you heard that and you were like, well, that's the war, well, then that was the point. I do thank you for the support. But I've never heard of anyone really having a complaint about that. And so I think that's kind of a bit of an outlier. But a big thanks to you for the support nonetheless. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we also have a 10 from John Tango. And thank you very much, John Tango, for that $10 support. He said 2 Costco chickens for the anniversary for a first-time super chat.
And thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible and keep it running. And so a huge thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to interesting adjective, Yenya Tolls. Put in a 10. And thank you very much for that $10 support, by the way. We do appreciate it very much. And of course, we do appreciate that. But our next one goes to Siri, who puts in a 10 and said, thank you for 4 years of hard work and dedication. And Enforcer Bros. The horrors persist, but so do we. Damn it. Knowledge is power. Love Ukraine. XO from Oslo.
And thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And a huge shout out to you up there in Oslo in Norway. And I got to thank you incredibly for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this channel possible and we wouldn't be able to keep it running. And so a humongous thanks to you so much once again. And of course, hopefully we'll see that the Ukrainians come out on top in this whole thing. So a big thanks to you once again. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we also have a $10 support from Sadada Hosoda, who said, thank you, guys.
And a huge thanks to you for the support and helping this channel to keep it running. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And also a big shout out to Bud, who put in a 10 as well. He said, hit the like button, everybody, and let's get those likes up. And LSA, we're not a gang, we're an army.
Hey!
And we're not actually an army, we're just simply a little bit of an organization. Actually, we're not even an organization. We don't even really exist. It's just kind of like out there. You know, LSA, they say LSA. Some people say they have dinner with LSA. Some people say that they saw LSA. Nobody's really sure.
It's mostly peaceful.
It's the summer of peace.
It's the summer of love. Don't mind the burning buildings. Oh man, wait, hang on, man. What did that frat clown say to that cop? He was like, "What's going on here?" He was like, "It's a celebration of life." He's like, "Yeah, okay, dude."
Yeah,
It's like,
celebration of life. Yeah, they're celebrating life, doing this weird stuff in the basement. I would rather celebrate life on the surface, outside the basement, with no other dude shirtless down here. Okay.
Yeah, man. It's like. Man, bro, I thought of that meme. I don't know if you ever seen it. It's like, some people have been asking me, why am I shirtless? Have you seen that one?
I hadn't seen that.
Oh,
what was
bro.
that context?
Dude, it was not good. I'd have to go send it to you afterwards. I was hoping you'd get it. Maybe some people would get what I'm talking about because it's a famous clip.
Nothing says celebrating life more like hanging out in a dark basement with no lights turned on with dudes with their shirts off. Nothing,
covered in piss.
Nothing says celebrating life quite like that. I tell you what, with
Man,
liquids all over the floor, I tell you what, I've never heard of celebrating life quite like that.
I love celebrating life with welts all over my body, covered in piss with my shirt off, tied up to some pillar in the middle of a dim basement, getting screamed at by the frat dude whose voice is literally froggy from how much he's been screaming. Boy, this is a great celebration of life. I love living. But anyways, with that, oh man. But with that, a huge thanks to you for the support. Double this channel to keep on running. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And this one goes to Crispy, who put in a 10. And thank you very much, Crispy, for that support. We do appreciate that. And we also had a 5 from Mark Dixon. And we also had a 5 from Auntie. And thank you all 3 for that support. They did not leave comments, but we appreciate that very much. And Enforcer, what say you?
I gotta thank you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. Because if it wasn't for all of you, we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible and keep it rolling. So huge thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we're on to the next one.
We also have a 5 from Hoodoo, who put in 2 supports. And his first one said, has Ukraine artillery, drones, or missiles cut off the Russian land bridge to Crimea?
Generally, it's the drones that have kind of caused the most damage, but nothing has truly cut off the land bridge, but the drones do cause a decent amount of damage. And so I hope that does address it the best I can. A big thanks to you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And Hoodoo's second support says, if we don't do something soon, we'll pay later. And if we do something soon, we will also pay later. There's no free lunch in dealing with Iran.
No, there isn't, but we have to deal with them nonetheless. So big thanks to you for the support and helping this channel to keep running. And we're on to the next one.
And this one goes to Stan American, who put in a 5. He said, if Iran strikes Europe, can NATO return fire? And Putin, crazy thought. What would be the response?
If Iran strikes Europe, that would be an Article 5 invocation, without a doubt. So they could respond in full force and arms. And the Russians probably wouldn't respond all too much because they would probably be hoping that that would tie up a lot of military aid to Ukraine. And so they wouldn't want to focus the Europeans back on the Ukraine situation, at least at that point. So I hope that is addressed the best I can. And a huge thanks to you for the support and helping this channel to keep running. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And we also have a 5 from Jamil Hamilton, who said that video of the F-16s flying by their flares is from Ukraine.
Oh, it is? Why, color me shocked. From Ukraine, you say? Let me take a look at that. Let's see here. Anything on the ground? I'll take it your word for it. I mean, generally that was just a clip attached, a generic one. I wasn't showing them down at Diego Garcia. I think I forgot to mention that on air. But this was more so just showing off the F-16s. But I do thank you for the support and sharing that. And I'll have to look into that clip a little bit more and see if it is from Ukraine, because it might be. But a huge thanks to you for the support. I hope that it's addressed that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we also have a 5 from Ryan H. on Wheels, who said, hello, enforcers. And do we know if the rotisserie chickens at the Costco in Puerto Vallarta are safe right now? LOC.
They are safe and sound. The Costco rotisserie chickens are always safe and perfectly cooked for only $4.99. It's an amazing deal. And you too can get it right now. And now we're not sponsored, by the way. Like, I just gotta make that clear.
Did you see those memes coming out? Everybody was talking about the Costco. I think some people also got my tweet that I put out about, oh my God, what are they doing to the Costco? And people sort of ran with it. Someone put out a meme of like one of the missiles that the U.S. makes, like I think Northrop or one of those companies makes them, and they put the Kirkland signature logo on the side of it and said, when Costco whips out their missile arsenal to protect their stores. I was like, honestly, like I don't know what Costco is going to do about that, but their store was getting torched in a parking lot. I'm not sure whatever happened to it.
Costco in... Oh, we want to go down to this one. Here we go. This is the Costco. Let's see what its hours are. Oh no. It's temporarily closed. It could have burned down.
Damn. Let me go. Let's see. Let's see here. Hold on. I got to get this meme real quick. Hold on a second. I'll have it here in a second. Dang it, I'm going to scroll all the way back down to get it. Let's see here. I'll stall for just a second while I try to grab this.
It was such a beautiful Costco. Why would they do it? I like, truly, Costco's are one of the most magical places that you can shop at. I mean, I don't know why they would do this. It's a great place. Oh my God. Oh, that's pesos. Sorry, I thought that was dollars. I was about to freak out. I was like, $439 for some signature salmon. But it's pesos, so it's a different conversion, but similar price to what it is in the States. But wow, this is something else. Oh my God, they got mopeds for sale in here. Wow, that's cool. I like that. That's pretty neat. What is this? They got that chicken Alfredo right here. Nice chicken Alfredo, delicious chicken Alfredo. You gotta love your chicken Alfredo. Man, I wonder what it looked like outside of this Costco. This wonderful, blessed Costco. Oh, wow. This was actually neat. This was actually nice. Wow. Man.
I can't find the meme of the Costco missile. I don't know what happened to it. I don't know if maybe they had it taken down or what, but it's gone. Like I don't know where it is. It's not on my feed or anything. I remember reposting it. I don't know if maybe someone like had an issue with it, maybe possibly told them to take it down or what, but I don't see it, sadly. I wish I could have shown that.
Man, let's see. What is this? What is this? Oh wow.
That's that Plaza Playa.
Man, that's that Plaza Caracol. Man, like that's that mall. Oh, bro, they got a mall center and everything. Bro, this is legit. Bro, this is pretty cool. Wow. Well, what else does this magical place of Puerto Vallarta look like? Let's see, where's the beach?
Well, it's kind of scorched right now. Looks a little troublesome.
Oh, don't mind the miniguns and the fires. Like it's all good. I wonder what the flights are like right now to Puerto Vallarta. I bet you they're cheap. Let me go pull them up. Let's see. Salt Lake City to Puerto Vallarta. Oh wow. They're still gonna rip your ass off. It's $570 in economy for a round trip there right now.
Damn.
I mean, that's on the 13th of March. That's like 3 weeks out. Man, bro, it's like the place is under attack right now, and it's still $570 to go there and back. That's.
Hell, they can pay me $500 to go there.
I mean, hell, I don't think they're going to be selling any tickets. I'll just be straight up at those prices. Because, they always say, folks, that after, like, a horrific event, the prices of everything go down, like the tickets, the hotels, and everything. Apparently not for American Legacy Airlines, because they're all charging, like, $570. There's no, like, skimpers there. I mean, they're all charging top dollar. But anyways, with that, it is time for us to move on and into the next one.
And our next one goes to Jason Curling, who put in a 5. And Jason said, how much will Hungary not vote yes for EU for money to Ukraine affect the war?
I thank you for the support. Unfortunately, I think I might not be understanding that question at the moment, but I do thank you for the support nonetheless. And with that, we are on to the next one.
Also, by the way, I think there might have been maybe like a grammar error in there or something. It sounded like I think there might have been a grammar error. I'm not really sure how to describe it, but I think the question he was asking was, do you think that Hungary is going to keep voting no to prevent money from going to Ukraine to affect the war?
Oh, yeah, they will. And so I hope that does address that well. And a big thanks to you for support and help this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Robert Krogan, who put in a 2. He said, good evening, all.
And good evening to you. I hope you do well, and I thank you for the support and helping channel to keep running. And so a big thanks to you so much once again. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one here goes to, let's see. Someone in the chat said, there's a pirate ship in the port of Puerto Vallarta. Well, that'd be bad because, I mean, they're already getting attacked by the cartel, so if the pirates are pulling up too, I mean, this place might be cooked. Well, what do you mean, like a pirate ship? Like a legit pirate ship? What are we talking about here?
It's probably one of those tourist ones, where they take the people on the excursions. I think that's it right there. Is it?
It could be it. We got a picture of this thing right here.
Hold on, I gotta go pull it up. Where's fire?
Those things actually fire cannons. Those things scared the hell out of me when I was younger. They'd go by blowing those cannons off and stuff like that. Boom. It's like, dang, man, that's a loud sound going on.
It's literally the one from Destin, Florida. I mean, it's exactly the same one.
Oh my God. I tell you, they got the cartels after, man. They got the pirates pulling off. It's like, man, I tell you what, this is the type of pirate ship that pulls up, and like those cars with like the loud bass, the trunk's like shaking and shattering. It's going, boom. It's like this ship's pulling up like that too, blasting some trap.
Bro, they would be blasting the trap on that thing too. Oh my God. I remember they'd be like slowly putting around in the bay in Destin, Florida. Just, man, I woke up in a new Bugatti. It'd be like, that's not even pirate music.
With the wood, like timber shivering and stuff like that on the side of it, and the cannons blowing off.
Bro, I mean, the ship's timbers would be shaking so hard, literally the water would be like vibrating around the ship. And then they'd be like, all right, let's fire off the cannon. Boom! And it was like the loudest cannon that you've ever heard. It's louder than a real cannon. It's like, what do they put in that damn thing? It's like they're trying to make everyone deaf on that thing. They're looking for some lawsuits for hearing loss. But beyond that, though, it's literally the same one from Florida. So that's actually crazy. I guess there's like a company out there that just mass produced these.
Yeah, it could be.
Maybe. But with that, it is time for us to move on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Matt Powers, who put in a 2. And thank you very much, Matt, for that $2 support. We also have a 2 from Bruce Lee, who said, don't own a vineyard, but there's vines in the yard.
Oh, man, they call me rich because I got a vineyard. Little do they know, it's Weeze. But big thanks to you for support and helping this channel to keep it running. I hope that does address that well. And folks, I'm so poor, I don't even have weeds. I just have concrete. But a big thanks to you once again for support and helping this channel to keep running. And with that, we're on to the next one.
We also have a 2 from Bruce Lee yet again. He said, not quack, just quack, brain.
Quackity quack, and don't come back. And a big thanks to you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And this one goes to Bruce Lee, who put in a 2. He said, it's rumored that the first corporate war could be Costco versus Sam's Club.
Ooh, that'd be interesting. Honestly, my money would be on Costco. Costco's going to really give it to Sam's, like if that happened. But a big thanks to you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Plazant, who puts in a 1, and Mark Andre Burnett, who also put in a 1 as well. And thank you very much, Plazant and Mark, for that support. And we also have a 1 from Plazant yet again. He said, I personally thought the U.S. would strike Iran this weekend, and do you think it might be because something operational conditions were suboptimal?
I think it's generally the civilian leadership that's holding it back like usual at this point. But I do thank you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And I hope that does just that well. And Matthew, honestly, Matthew, I was just thinking, man, have you seen that translation of that other Bad Bunny song where he's like climbing the telephone pole and he's like, I'm staying in Puerto Rico. Oh, you know, he did that. Have you seen that?
Yeah, I saw
And he's
that.
like, damn evil one.
I love Puerto Rico. Oh, you damn evil bastard. I don't even know what the hell. Like, that guy's music is not good. Like, I'm sorry if that offends anybody, but that guy's music is garbo.
Bro, he said, I'm staying in Puerto Rico. Oh, I'm staying in Puerto Rico. Oh, damn
He's like holding on
evil
to that
one. Oh, dude, that damned evil one, bro. Honestly, man, that's been sticking with me, man. That's been making me die laughing. If y'all don't know what we're talking about, there's been some, like, I think it's like AI Spanish to English translations of Bad Bunny's songs from the Super Bowl, and they are all gold. Like, they're like they say I have many girlfriends. They say I have many girlfriends. And then it translated auntie to like titty. And it was like, titty asked me why I had so many girlfriends. Because I take them to the VIP, to the VIP. It's like the funniest thing ever. It's been making me die laughing in the background because I see so many memes on it. And I'm like, oh my god. And like, I just love the one where it's like, I'm staying in Puerto Rico. Oh, damned evil one. Because it's like, has so much like real behind the damned evil one. Like there's like someone just popped them out of the blue. They're like, that damned evil one. But anyways, enough of that. Enough of that. I gotta get off of the whole side there. But anyways, with that, we're on to the next one.
And we also have a 2 from Ryan H. on Wheels. He said, I just sent the Costco meme to y'all in LSA.
Oh, you did? Matthew, can you find it?
Is it on Twitter or like where do you send it? Let me check here.
Where'd they send it?
Let's see here. Let me see the email. Let's see here. I'm not seeing an email. Let's see here. I'm not. Where do you send it? Let's see here. I'm not sure where you send it. I don't see it anywhere. Maybe send it to Discord. It's not on Discord either. Well, are you sure you sent it to the right person? I think some random person might have just got the Costco meme out of the blues. I don't see it anywhere.
Brother, like, what is this?
Man, I'm not sure how somebody's going to interpret that. Somebody's going to get a random picture of a missile with the Kirkland signature on the side of it. I'm not sure it's going to go well.
Yeah, brother, put it as a caption. This is a warning. Like, it's like, oh no. But anyways, with that, I do thank you for the support. Sadly, we didn't get it apparently. But with that, we are on and into the next one.
And with that, folks, that is our last super chat to address right there. So we are now moving right into our live chat questions and our Morse code decoders. Tonight we had Paul, Kevin, Mason, Joni, Norm, Arabelle, her Royal Fluffiness, Coach, Cupperteric, Sire, and Brian. They said the Morse code says, Russia is playing with a deadly fire, threatening nuclear war. They have much to lose. LLT, LSA.
And that is the sound of money. Y'all hit that down on the nail. That is the Morse code message of the night. And I can congratulate y'all greatly for getting that Morse code message correct time and time again. Because at least Springer Signal Corps never fails and always gets that Morse code message dead on the nail. So a huge congrats to y'all once again. And with that, folks, due to us being overtime, we're going to be getting 3 live chat questions and then rounding the stream on out for the night. So we're on to the third to last question of the night.
And this one is going to go to none other than Nick, who said, did you hear about the Turkish F-16 that crashed on the highway today?
I did hear about that. We didn't cover it tonight, but I did hear about it, and it appears to have been some sort of a accident, some sort of a misjudging of altitudes or something along those lines. Or maybe an engine failure. I'm not really sure. But I hope that does address that well, and we are on to the second to last question of the night.
And this one goes to Ella MC Wheels Nafo, who said, I've been seeing one of our carriers have some serious plumbing issues, but I've also been seeing that's not true. And any idea what's up with that? So the down low with that is this, because I did some research into it. Someone is going back and getting old videos. There actually was a time where there was a very bad sewer issue on one of those carriers, and the video that you see of like the foot of like sewer water in the bathroom, like sloshing back and forth with like nasty stuff in it. That is a real piece of footage, but it is extremely old. Like, it's from a long time ago. The people are recirculating that like it's new for propaganda reasons, I'm sure, to try to bash the U.S. Navy. They are having a plumbing issue, like, make no mistake, but it's not like that. They don't have, like, turds going around the floor in the bathroom. It's not like that. But Enforcer, what say you?
Now, they don't have no floating turds, but they do have a bit of a pipes issue. It's just that people are trying to visualize that by taking the last example and then showing it, which is either to discredit the Navy or it's just a innocent issue, and they're just trying to show the last time that it happened to kind of give an idea of what's happening this time, maybe, and, then it's lost in translation. But that's generally what we know at the moment. So with that, I hope that does address it the best I can. And with that, it is time for us to move on to the final question of the night. And so, who is the lucky last person who put in the lucky last question of the night?
And that viewer is Michael Skelton, who said, do you guys think the U.S. will have a plan when Iran collapses, or that we're going to rely on our allies to secure nuclear materials against folks from procuring it that shouldn't have it?
Knowing how the current government likes to operate, they're probably going to try and do everything via Zoom, which means remotely. So we probably won't be on the ground in any real way at all, and then that will lead to a whole other new can of worms opening up from trying to deal with this one. Tying one in creates a whole bunch of other loose ends. So I hope that does address it the best I can, and with that, we've reached the end of tonight's stream. I've got to say that we're entirely honored and greatly appreciative to know that so many of y'all have continued to pick this channel as your primary source of news. I also have to say that we're entirely honored of all the people who watched our live stream on Sunday on what was going on in Mexico, because we actually ended up being number 26 in America that day from all of y'all watching. We're entirely honored and greatly appreciative. I also got to thank everyone for joining us after the State of the Union, because we went from 11,000 live viewers to 15.6 thousand live viewers after the end of the State of the Union. It's pretty wild to look at that on a graph, and I'm glad to know that so many of y'all consider this channel to be a primary source of news, and I hope y'all have enjoyed tonight. We will see you all tomorrow at 10 p.m. Eastern Time to cover the next 24 hours of the news from around the world, and if there is enough news to make a short war video, Enforcer Matt will be the one making it. And so with that, good night, good luck, take care, stay safe, Slava Ukraini, Haram Slava, long live the East Spring Army, and long live the Republic.
And with that, folks, we will see you all tomorrow on the short war video. I'm sure there probably will be enough news tomorrow, so you'll probably be expecting to see one, most likely. And in the meantime, a big shout out to the 107,000 plus people that joined us tonight, which is still a whopping amount for a Sotu night. We were not expecting a huge amount of viewership, and that's actually a lot more than we were expecting. So we appreciate you all for joining us, and we will see you tomorrow night at 10 p.m. Eastern for the next Nightly War News stream. And in the meantime, get some rest, and we'll see you on the next one. And of course, Slava Ukraine, Hero Slava, get some rest, and good night.